Peace.
Greetings, greetings, everyone. I cannot see the chat, but can you all hear me? Put a one in the chat. Let us know if we can be heard. Sorry, that's my notifications going off. So, peace, everyone. Welcome to the next and final. Can you all hear me? Let me know because my screen keeps freezing. Let me know. I think my screen's frozen. Oh boy. Let's try again. Yeah, my screen is frozen. Can you all see me? I apologize. My screen is frozen.
Yes, I think they can hear you and I think they can see you. So peace and welcome.
All right, thank you. I had a whole screen switcheroo on me, so excuse me. All right, so welcome everyone. Peace. Welcome to our very last of our breakdowns with you all, with the women of Anu. And tonight but before we even do that, I just want to give thanks to Ya for bringing us forward and bringing us through to Thursday so we could all build and, commune together. I give thanks for Chief Yuya's, vision and his understanding of the need for us to have this type of space to commune and to build, and for the opportunity to be able to build and speak in this space. And for those of you all who are coming in, welcome and thank you for joining us, right? So this is the last of our bills. Welcome to the breakdown of Eyes Wide Shut. It's an old film that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. We're going to explore this psychological drama, and which was directed, interestingly, and produced and co-written by Stanley Kubrick. And I think Stanley Kubrick keeps coming up, right, repeatedly in our movie breakdowns. Chief did another one of his pieces, Space Odyssey. And this film though is based off of a 1926 novella called Traumnovelle. Let me know if I got it right. When you hear a Traumnovelle, dream story. But this version is actually based in the 1990s in New York City. And the plot actually centers on Bill Harford and his wife Alice, but there are a couple of other characters in there. I thought it made sense. And before I go on, you all can speak a little bit. I don't know if you got to say and greet everyone in the chat and say hello, peace, how you do? Well, not hello, peace, greetings, and all of that. So I'll pause.
So peace, and welcome to the space. I am Ima Yakira Eden. I am so excited to break down and explore and dissect this particular film. So I'm happy to be here.
Greetings, Erev Tov, everyone. I am Achot Yafe, and yes, I'm excited as well to break down Eyes Wide Shut. I think it's appropriately named. Even how I watched the film when it first came out years ago, I watched my eyes wide shut, and now there's some things that you have to learn things, and now it's like, oh, so now they're open, and so willingly we'll bring our deliberation and understanding to you all, and we'll have a great discussion, great build, and shalom to everyone in the chat.
Right. Go ahead.
Oh no, so I was just going to give a little bit more about Traumnovelle and the or Dream Story, which was a novel, and then it was later a novel, I believe, written in the 1920s, 1926, and as you said, Akoti Maria, it was written by Arthur Schnitzler. Now, like based on my research, I'm going to say that it seems Kubrick was really a stickler for sticking with what it was he was passionate about. And so it said that he sat on this particular story for 30 years before he actually went ahead and, you know, explored making it a movie production. And what was interesting is the first time that he considered making this movie, it was early in his marriage, and it was his wife who discouraged him from exploring, you know, such sexually controversial themes while they were like new in their union together, which in light of what we may know happened right after this film was shared, might have been fortuitous of her that she delayed it, you know, maybe by 10-15 years. But I'll be the one kind of comparing and contrasting what happened in the Eyes Wide Shut version of the story as compared to the dream story, because there are some differences and nuances. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
So I'll say that our major characters are, of course, Alice. And I'm pretty sure when you hear Alice, you think Alice in Wonderland and Alice in the Looking Glass. And, you know, throughout this breakdown, a few things will be made reference to, and some of those lectures that Chief has given based on Alice and her conversation with Caterpillar and Into the Looking Glass, those will be referenced, and some of those links will be placed in the chat below. Alice, of course, is a major part of this particular film because she is a representation of desire. And we see that coming up over and over. There's also some additional parallels that we'll talk about in terms of her character and what it represents. We have Dr. Bill Harford, and when I kept thinking his name was Will the entire time. Will. And I actually started looking into will and its connection to imagination and desire. And then Ima Yokira Eden says, well, you know, Bill is short for William. And then I go, ooh, all right. I didn't, you know, understand that. And the last person I'll actually mention is Victor Zegler. I'm pretty sure there are many others that are important to the film, but this Jewish name popped up, and you know, it seems really important because he then represents the epitome of the elite, I would say, throughout this film. Anyone wants to jump in before I jump into the scenes?
Sure, go ahead. Oh, you know, that piece about Ziegler, and whether or not it was even used to like represent a Jewish name, or I think there are some other, you know, Eastern European maybe connections. I wonder about, only because when I was comparing, like listening to the original story and even some of the commentary around the making of Eyes Wide Shut in comparison to Dream Story, and in particular the screenwriter who aided in the writing of this movie, he touched on the fact that there was like painstaking effort to scrub anything that would even connect to the original character being Jewish, or anything that would even associate with that faith, if you will, or that belief system. So I'm almost inclined to think that, you know, even that may not be what we think it is. Like, you know, everything in this film, or in all of his films, are in Kubrick's films, are so twisty and windy and layered that it may not be that obvious. So it's like we're gonna have to dig. We're gonna have to dig through.
Sister Yafe, you wanted to jump in? If not, I'm going to jump into the scenes. All right. Well, we're going to jump off and start off with scene one. Like, we see Alice preparing for something. We also see red consistently, right? In little pieces of the corners of the screen, but then it becomes very prominent throughout the home. As we see her preparing for a party. So the first scene that we're looking at actually is I say it's the waltz, right? That's the very first thing that we kind of zoom in on there. And it's the first moment we actually see these two characters intimate, because we see intimacy, but it feels like there's a lot of exposure. Like it feels like roommate-ish, like they're roommates. Sorry, I'm making up words. Sorry. It feels like they're roommates almost, as they prepare. But this is the very first scene, and I wanted to know if there were any striking symbols or symbolism that you all found as the opening scene unfolded.
Yeah. I think what you said is I agree. Like, there's this lack of connection between the two of them as they prep for this party. But I thought it was significant, being that, as we'll get into, like, this is like the dreamscape, right? It starts with her looking in the mirror. So right there, like, we get that first clue of, like, we're going to be taken through, like, the looking glass and that reflection of a reality.
Yes, definitely so. And I mean, it again, I think at the beginning I said, as I saw her name, I instantly thought of Alice in Wonderland and Alice the Looking Glass. And I tried to count the many times that glass mirrors and her staring into the mirror actually appears. And it's so many times, so, and I think that those things are significant, because I was actually reading, Kubrick had Tom Cruise walk through a door 95 times just to get it perfect. So it tells you about the precision of each of the elements that we see, even from the beginning.
So, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I watched some of the like interviews. Of course, they didn't have Kubrick, but the interviews of both Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, and they both spoke about an exhaustion. And it's interesting, and please put it in the chat if you noticed it. There was almost like a delirium, particularly when we cut to the scene where they, come back from the party and they're like smoking in an attempt to unwind. Oh, pardon me. In an attempt to unwind. And there's this. What is she talking about? Why is she still walking so staggered and tired? Even when they're arguing and she goes to sit on the floor, her speech is like really slurred. And what's said in those interviews was that he made them do the scenes so many times that first it was like, okay, we need to get it right. Then it's like, okay, we finally got it, and this should be enough. And then it's like once they got past the exhaustion of we have to do this again, there was this organic experience and exchange that came in every scene. And if you can think about some of the scenes where it's like, what's going on here? Like, are they really high? Like, are they really drunk? Is her like, did he actually have her get drunk to perform, even the waltz, the actual waltz, that we're going to get into a little while later? No, that was to like, that's how he pushed his artists, his characters, his actors to kind of really personify the role. And just another tidbit, it said that he actually didn't like working with stars because of how tyrannical he knew he was, and how hard he pushed his, the folks that performed in his movies. So yeah.
And telltale as well too is the way he initiated emotional reactions from the actors and actresses so that it can be realistic.
Yeah, because when she in the scene with the waltz, I was like, she is truly drunk. Like that happened so fast, and I was like, well, does this mean that we're supposed to know? Like maybe there's a hint, like she drinks. She is, unemployed. Like her art gallery got shut down. It got closed down. They ran out of money. So then it's like, is she drinking? To compensate for whatever emotions and feelings and thoughts she has around, that happening to her in her life. But that makes sense. That's like, no, that's an actual delirium, like almost like being drunk, from being delirious, And that makes a lot of sense. Even I did notice, like in the scene where they're arguing, I'm like, what is going on with that laugh? I'm like, is this even real? Like, what is happening right now? I was like, I don't even know if she's really laughing, but that makes sense that it's like a delirium from doing it. But then I think you do get a more organic exchange rather than like you can see that they're acting. And I think like Chief did point this out when he did the breakdown for the other Kubrick film, Space Odyssey, when he made the reference to The Shining and how many times he had to make
yes.
and Shelley Duvall do, specific scenes over and over and over again. I think he specifically, I'm home, the one where he axes through the door and he's like, I'm home. And I was like, that scene scared me for a good part of my childhood. I was afraid of Jack Nicholson because of that scene for years. So like, I'm like, his vision for like what he wants to do, it gets across to the end user, who's the film watcher.
Yeah. Are there any other significant parts of the beginning that you want to talk about, even if it's the color? Because again, we do see the next scene is actually Zegler's party, where they're at the mansion, and there is I don't know if any of you caught it, but there is a painting of the what is it called, the Somerton is actually visible in one of the scenes. And I found that interesting because again, Kubrick is, like strategically placing bits of clues leading up to other parts of the film. But we see a continuation of red. And now we see what's introduced is the play on the rainbow, or the idea of the rainbow, which is a theme we were speaking about through the Christmas colors. So
Right.
it's a highlighting of the rituals and other things that's taking place by focusing on Christmas, or it's used to hide the fact that the Christmas lights are actually a hidden clue to the rainbow, right? The rainbow colors and rainbow lights and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And I think of Festival of Lights. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Festival of Lights and all of that. Go ahead. Sorry.
We talked about that rainbow, and that rainbow is a thread throughout the entire film. Whereas, like, you see the Christmas tree, right? We know people have different ways of decorating their Christmas trees. For those of us who came from kind of that space of acknowledging like Western holidays and all of that, like we remember like what they look like. But in this film, the rainbow colors were used specifically for each Christmas tree decoration. Some people like to do all white, all silver, all purple. Every single room, and they're all, for the most part, with the exception of the hospital toward the end of the film, and I think the Domino and Sally's apartment, each tree was miniature. So there was like a miniature tree when he visits his patient, and his tree, I think, their tree in their house. But the point is, like, there's a Christmas tree in every scene with the colorful rainbow lights, with the exception of the masquerade ball. There are no colors but black, white, and red. Those are the main colors in the mask ball. But everywhere else, there's the bright rainbow Christmas tree lights.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I know we shared this in like the prep and all the backstage stuff, but the idea of Christmas usually being synonymous with Christianity, there is no religious symbols. There are no religious symbols anywhere in this film. So, not only are the Christmas trees kind of placed everywhere except for, the few places that you acknowledge, well, the one place, which is in the the place that looks the most like an edifice, right? It looks like a cathedral. It looks like and interestingly enough, it said that this entire film was made in England, although it would be pretty easy to make it in New York, I think Chief touched on this when he did 2001: A Space Odyssey. Kubrick did. He had a thing with planes and with traveling and flying. And so I think when Chief shared, he said, you know, or maybe it was like when I was digging, I don't remember, but he actually changed the location at the last minute for 2001: A Space Odyssey, because where they were supposed to film, yeah, Chief shared it, because they wound up taking stills of where they were going to make the first scene with the monkeys. But in this film, though it said that the entire thing was filmed in a stage, you know, on a sound stage in England, the edifice is said to have been one of the well-known New York Masonic lodges. And so, as we know, you know what's interesting? There's a part of Brooklyn. This just clicked when I said Masonic Lodge. I don't know if this always happens, but when I worked in corrections, which is a long time ago, I did a favor for one of the COs. It was nothing illegal. She had a relative that was in it was the way I said that, like, I did a favor. I smuggled some cookies in. No, but one of the officers, she pretty much had a nephew that was in the adolescent building that I worked in, and she asked me to allow him to make a phone call, which I worked in social service, so it wasn't illegal. But then later, her thank you was an invitation to a gathering, and it was to become an Eastern Star. And the meeting was, this is when I lived in Brooklyn. It's weird how this all connected. The invitation for the meeting, which I was like, I don't know nothing about this. I was in my early 20s. I'm like, I don't know nothing. What's this about? Oh, it's an organization for, like, it's like a sorority, but better. Okay, cool. The initial meeting was at a really well-known church in Brooklyn, a huge historical edifice right in Clinton Hill. And so now I'm connecting these dots in my head, because I also had a friend, like in my late 20s, who a man that I knew, he was invited, and he too was invited to a really ornate church in the city. And so now that I'm thinking about it, and I'm picturing this well-known Masonic temple in New York City, I'm wondering, you know, why am I calling it an edifice? Maybe it was, because if you look at the pictures or stills of where the are we calling it a ritual? I guess we are. Where the ritual debauchery went down. That's what I'm going to call it, because it was more than a whole lot of
at its best.
It was a whole lot of stuff going on. But when we look at what the interior looked like, the pew, like the only thing that was missing were the pews. Mm-hmm. Like the overlooking from the balcony, and you know, just how ornate the decor was. It definitely spoke to it being a church. I'll just say, I'll leave it there. I think I might have said enough. But that said, there was no pagan, there was no Christian symbology, but there was lots of pagan symbols. And yeah, the Christmas tree is definitely one of those, but there was also the Star of Ishtar. That was kind of that 8-point, that was like everywhere, y'all. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. But Ishtar was, I mean, just some basics, is like a Mesopotamian deity that represents sex and war. And so that's just, it was supposed to be a little bit, but I just started having visuals of like, oh my gosh, there were all of these major churches that this stuff was happening at. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. I've been like invited to like I don't know what you call them, like induction, like once their secret part is over, and then they have the part where, you know, family and friends can come. It's always at a church. Always.
Yeah.
They're always related to churches, which I never understood. Both my father and brother are Masons, and I never understood, like, why is this? How is this even connected with the Most High? What is it? What? And, you know,
But
then it's like,
exactly.
well, it's secret, so you don't need to know. And, you know, so then it's that idea of like, well, if you're not in this, like, you don't need to know. And maybe some of that is true. It's like, keep yourself protected from maybe things that are not of Yah. Like they're presented as if they are, even for those who are in them, but maybe they're not.
I think there's another side to that too, where it becomes very easy to hide what it is. Because if you walk, as you shared your story, Ima Yakira Eden, I thought about how many times I walked around New York and saw, you see Masonic symbolism on edifices that look like they are, yeah, churches. Exactly. They're, you know, there's all of the pillars, lots of high arched windows, stained glass. So, you know, it makes you think about the idea and the theme of masking that is predominant throughout this film as well, too, right? So how do they mask? So, and you know, I agree, Koti Yafe, maybe it is for protection, right? Protection for themselves, mostly. I don't think about it's protection for us, it's protection for themselves. And I think about, as a young child, I've heard stories of those who are part of some of those organizations. You know, there are secret codes, handshakes, but not even handshakes so much. Like you hear people talk about that now, but rings. And I remember someone who I know, that's what I'm going to say, stole, well, not stole, but decided, okay, I'm gonna take a wear on this ring, decided to wear the ring in public, and did not realize that there would be anyone who would be aware that he was wearing that ring. And word got back to the owner, and it was like, well, how do you know? But that's the thing, you don't know. You know, it's all shrouded and encoded, and you know, there's that masking again that's happening. And I spoke about, you know, the mask, not just the masking, the physical mask, but the mask that we wear, people wear, and the mask that the characters wear in this.
You know, and it's so funny because we have completely ignored the chat. I'm going to say, because I'm on my iPad, I have to like go off screen to see it, but I did see something in the chat where Ima Sequoia, Ima top tier speaker, said, what did you do? So I did say what I did, but when thinking about what I did, like what the favor was, and thinking about the man that I knew that was also invited, it's not only is it about what secret, but it's about what secret they're keeping. So I did something that I should not have done. If you don't know, when you are a CO, or even, I mean, it's to your benefit to some degree as well. But if you want to look out for your people, then you don't say anything. But if you have a family member that comes through your jail, you're supposed to say something, because they shouldn't be in your jail, so that you're not tempted to do favors for them. But also, if you think about it, depending on how shiesty they are, see, when I talk about jail and I start talking all crazy, but depending on how, you know, how upstanding they are, they too can use that information and divulge, you know, oh yeah, she lives over here. Or so it can go both ways as to why you wouldn't do that. But she had to share something with me, and then I chose to do a favor for her, which then placed me in a position where she could invite me as a thank you. Right. So I'll keep your secret and thank you for keeping mine. Here's my token of appreciation. Because she wasn't the one that I met with who then said what the process was. And I was like, no, I'm cool. before, I'm not much of a joiner. I'm like, I'm here, but I haven't joined very much in life, and it's anything structured, because it's like, no, I'm good. This sounds weird. So honestly, it just sounded like too many requirements. It's like you had to do fundraising, you had to go to meetings, you had to. I'm like, this is a sorority. I'm good on that. That was corny to me in college. I'm not a sorority girl.
That is so crazy. I had like a similar experience, like, like, oh, do I want to? I don't really feel like doing all that. Now, nobody gonna be spitting on my face or whatever y'all do.
Bye.
All that.
Goodbye.
Nope, y'all gonna kick me off the line.
I'm gonna spit right back. I'll be
right.
like a camel out this piece,
so
a llama.
Like, I come from I have relatives, I will say, who are in very, divine night, whatever, they're in a lot of those, and more than a few, and I was just like, I don't know, I just never felt the need, and I have moments where it's like, oh, do I want to? And something just kept preventing me from like doing it. And it's just like, I don't feel like going through all y'all hoops because they don't make no sense to me. I don't want to do it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, so now that we done, I don't know, do you want to go through the chat before we go any further?
I could manage the chat. Yes, he been doing the sexually explicit films, because what we didn't say, we also as a group watched Clockwork Orange.
Like Clockwork Orange, yes. I was like, we have got to watch like Clockwork Orange, and that was insane.
Yes, and also films that do have undertones of homosexuality, which like even as like through discussing, it's like there's that theme of the rainbow. We know now, like, there's certain groups who have taken over the idea of what the rainbow is, and this is prior to a lot of like, what we know now in the certain communities, right?
What is now prominent and public, because question of, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was hidden,
but yes,
for a while.
Right, and maybe there was the comment, I don't want to jump ahead, but we kind of did talk about the party already, where the two models are saying, we're gonna go where the rainbow ends. And it's like, well, maybe that was the end of the rainbow for that era, because what we know now is very different. There are certain things, words used in this film that you can be taken to court for if you mention them now. Yes. So there's the idea of like one era ending and another beginning. So it's a rainbow end, but there's another thing beginning for, another group. Peace, everyone. Did we call out everybody in the chat? Peace, Imanaya. Peace,
y'all.
Speakers. Peace, y'all. Right. Anu Radio, Jeremiah Mine. Peace, Dr. Ahava. Peace, Aki Ramik and Dr. Gertrude, Aki Rahim, and Master Menelek. I think that's everybody. And Aki Lo. Greetings, and welcome. We asked about the colors, and Ramik said black and red. Yes, definitely a lot of black and red. Top tier speaker said this film had very dark and mysterious vibes all over the place. You even see the music, like the piano score that was used, like the main theme is very menacing. It's literally like 3 notes, and that's enough to like scare the bejesus out of you, or the heebie-jeebies, whatever you want to call it. They asked what you did. Grandmother Eastern, right? Have you ever been invited to join Eastern Stars? I've had that experience too. Okay.
You're on mute.
Oh.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. When you said that, I was like, I had the same experience. Like, people. I think sometimes it's also to increase numbers, right? Because there's certain ways and things that are happening that are diminishing, and so they need, more people and younger people to do things, because.
Well, there's lots of fundraising. I know.
Yeah.
But anyway, whatever. Whatever they into.
Right. Anu Radio says, well, maybe that's the other way around. Perhaps churches look like Masonic buildings. That's the thought.
No, what I'm saying, no, these were churches. Like,
Oh,
I'm being crystal clear. Initially, when I thought about the description in the movie being a well-known Masonic temple in New York City, I thought, wow, that's interesting, because this looks like it looked like a cathedral. But as like, it just hit me that, wait, you had this experience, and these were cathedral-like churches in New York, like in Brooklyn. And it wasn't the same one, but they were both very ornate and very large. And I'm like, hold up, those were actual, like, they're active churches. Like, people go there to worship. But there's also meetings that happen there.
Right.
I mean, not on a Sunday, but you know, that's where the meetings were happening.
Mm-hmm.
So
These lodge, so it's like a lodge and a church. They had dual use. I get it.
apparently.
Just your point.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Your point actually makes me think of, and we're not there at that scene yet, but that the Rainbow Store, and then the Hidden Rainbow Store. So there being these sub layers to all of the masking. Again, back to the masking, you know?
It's very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
I was gonna say something about the you know what? It's funny, like you mentioned, like the dual use of these buildings, because we just went over in a study session, like, you know, church, right? And what they were, and we realized they weren't like these buildings, these edifices that we think of today. They were just like a group of people in somebody's house,
in a tent,
together, or in a tent, you know, gathering, you know, and they weren't these things. So it's like, well, what was the model, right, for the church? You know, where did the model come from for what the building?
The castle, the king's castle.
And then who goes to the elite class?
Right. So they wanted, it's like, well, okay, you're the king, but we're gonna have this other edifice to show that we, you know, just think about, like, I mean, ultimately then it's claimed that there's supposed to be separation between church and state, which, okay, but there's, so, you know, if you look at a monarch, there's that, you know, there's that idea. So you know what, I think we're going to, or was there anything else in the chat?
Top tier says Inanna is the name of the Mesopotamian god of love, sex, war, beauty, divine justice, and politics.
Yes, Inanna. Mm-hmm.
My little druggies. I don't. That was Aki El Karar. I don't know which and what point.
What did he say?
My little druggies. I don't know. Maybe it'll come to us. Another classic. Oh, I think when we were talking about the Clockwork Orange, A Clockwork Orange. Not my Beethoven. LOL. I think, did we talk about the music? The waltz? Maybe?
Oh, maybe they were referring to Beethoven.
Did he use any Beethoven in these films? I don't think so.
Not to my knowledge. But you know what? I think with all of our excitement, like, we're kind of jumping all over the place. So we have our master of ceremonies, right? So Akoti Maria is actually going to take us through scene by scene. And then we're going to lay in all of our, you know, all of our observations, because we are super excited. So let's go to it. Let's get to it.
Well, we started already.
I mean, get to the scene by scene.
Get back to the scene by scene. So, yeah. I mean, I think we could still pause on Zegla's party, because there are aspects of that party that we have not explored yet. I wanted to. This is the scene where, again, we see. I think I mentioned there being a picture in the living room. No, we're past that. I mentioned Festival of Lights. That's where I paused. And, you know, like, we see some sort of relationship between them, right? But the relationship, I think, between, and I'm talking about Alice and Dr. Bill. Bill. But the waltz isn't, I think it's very much reminiscent of what you are saying. There isn't, I don't want to use the word romance, but there isn't intimacy. The waltz feels very
stuffy,
right,
structured and boxy.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Almost very similar to the way we see them preparing for the the party as well. Very structured, very, it isn't very loving or so.
Right. Which, into interesting contrast, the song that's playing when they dance is "I'm in the Mood for Love," and there's clearly like not a real connection. We know in our new like love is a connection, but that connection is seemingly missing from the two of them. They're literally like on autopilot and going through motions. That's where the going to the party, where she's like, "Do you even know anybody here?" And he's like, "No, but this is what you get when you make house calls." So he's like moving in circles that he would not necessarily be in unless for lack of his, unless he had his job.
Right.
But he's still choosing to go. There's still that choice to be a part of that social elite that he serves.
Well, he's not as elite as he may, as one may think. And as we go through the movie, you'll see this theme of I'm a doctor. I'm a doctor. Him using his literal identification as his card for access, which gives the tone that he knows he's not really a part of the elite class that he's wants to dance with, wants to waltz with. And when she inquired about it, she says, why do we go to these every year? Why do we go to these every year? And he, or why are we invited every year? And it's like, yeah, because of what Akotiafe said. But it's that idea of like him being one of the few that do house calls. And then later, I mean, probably in another scene or two, we're going to discover why he, what the benefits or the folly of him making house calls actually are, what the folly be.
That's like basically says like you could do the hokey pokey. The hokey pokey is what gets you into the secret society.
Is that
membership? You put your left foot in, take your left foot out. Put your left foot in, you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey. You take off all your clothes. That's all it takes for membership. But you know what? You know what though? He has a point. Because we talked about like, while they're at this party, it's possible that they were being groomed. Either one or both of them was being groomed to maybe become part of this, secret society, or these secret, elite people who like to have orgies all night long.
It's highlighted by the fact that they're separated strategically. Oh, she said, well, Chief actually does a breakdown on the orgy, So
no, I'm laughing at the all night.
Oh, the all night. Okay. Oh, I mean,
it's like all slow.
Oh,
like, how do you know? Did he say that? Yeah. Well, you know what? Before we go to the next scene, I promised that I'd like share a little bit about the original story. And so in the original Traumnovelle, it's about a married couple. And this will also help you get a sense of what this story is about, because the tone is still fully there. So it's about a married couple, a man named Fredderland and his wife, I think her name was Alberta. And they go to this party, but it's not for Christmas, it's for Mardi Gras. And they have all of these like lustful fantasies, and they have this like just this really lusty time at this party. And then the wife confesses that prior to the years prior, she had an affair with, guess who? Tell me, y'all, who do you think she had an affair with? A naval officer.
I was like, Ziegler.
No!
Made a whole new story.
Y'all messed up the whole dang thing.
And chat.
Right. So pretty much, so the difference is that instead of it being in New York, it was in Vienna, around the turn of the century. And she pretty much confesses that the previous summer she had sex with a naval officer. And that sends the husband into this mental spiral. What I thought was cool about even the origins of Schnitzler's story was that he admired and studied a lot of Freud. And so what then happens with Schnitzler is that he spirals into this dreamscape of all of these sexual fantasies, and they're acted out by none other than the daughter. He too is a physician, so the daughter of one of his deceased patients. And what does he do? Well, remember, in the 20s, like, it would make sense that you make home calls, right? You do that. So it's kind of like we had to, to make the thread make sense. Even though this was in the 90s, home calls had to be made. So it's like it made him a rare type of, practitioner at that time, or a physician to the elite, to give it context and relevance. But then the same thing after that, it was approached by a prostitute while he's roaming on the streets, and a full exchange there. And then he happens to run into an old friend who tells him, hey, I'm a musician and I'm playing at this, party where there are lots of beautiful naked women and men wearing masks, just like eye masks at that time. So it is the same flow through. Of course, he also goes to a shopkeeper and discovers that the daughter is prostituting herself to the customers. It is the same, similar to what we went into with Maleficent. It is very much a mirror image of the story. And then, of course, there is the ritualized sex at the party, even going to the morgue and finding the body, which we'll talk about later. But I just wanted to share that the story, dream story, or Traumnovelle, really follows the movie, or the movie follows the story pretty consistently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Real quick, I'll just go to the chat before we move to the next scene. Jocelyn Poop was the composer. She said Kubrick asked her to create sex music. Yes. And we'll get into the music that she created. Like, the interesting thing, I don't know that she created anything, and even though she pulled from other sources,
Compiled it. Mm-hmm.
Right, and then she chopped and screwed and just reversed it, throw that thing in reverse, that's what she did. The song that was used at the Masquerade Ball is literally, it's from her album Deluge, and it's called Backwards Priest, because it's a recording of Romanian priests during a liturgy, saying, certain thing, whatever priests say. I did find it, but I don't know if it's relevant right now. Whatever they say during liturgies, and then she played it backwards, and because it's ominous, we know, like, there's the singing and like lamenting, and then playing it backwards sounds very ominous and menacing. And that's what they used for the ritual scene. So I thought it was interesting. I'm like, well, she really didn't compose nothing. She took from what others had already done, and then maybe like diddled with it a little bit. Even what sounded like an original score, like if you know music, you know that it wasn't like the three notes, the very menacing three notes. That's from a whole orchestra movement by György Ligeti, and it's his second movement of that orchestra, called Musica Riserata number 2. The waltz that we hear, it's waltz number 2, from, I forget his first name, but it's Shostakovich. And that's the author. So I guess she just, the coordinator. She coordinated the music.
All right, so what scene are we up to now?
Okay, well, so we're still at the I think this is a new scene. We're actually talking about gonna get into the overdose, but I think before we get into the overdose, there are parts of the party that we didn't touch on. That conversation that happens, once Alice gets a buzz, right? Alice gets a buzz, and then along comes
Sandor Stavros.
Sandor, the Hungarian, right? And as soon as he said, "I'm Hungarian," I was like, "You're hungry for what? Now, what are you hungry for?"
Yeah. Do you like periods? Right. Okay.
Okay. And I thought of that's as you were building, I mentioned that his entrance and the way he spoke to her reminded me of the conversation between Hawa and the serpent in the garden. Because I mean, the S's did it for me because it's like, where are you going with these S's? But I also caught the neuro linguistic programming because you see, yes, she was drinking, but there's a bit of hypnosis happening as he's speaking to her because you do see him infiltrating her mind. He starts talking about, well, in olden times, marriage was just because of this, so there is an infiltrating of her mind that's actually happening. And I know Chief has broken down the S sound and how that connects. So as I saw that piece, I thought it was a really important piece because I wonder again, well, not wonder, it was symbolic of a seed being planted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know. When we do this, we watch and study and make our notes, and then come together. And it's always amazing how it's funny. Kotsi Yafe touched on it. She was like, "Yeah, I know we'll have similar streams of consciousness." We all wound up touching on a lot of the similar themes, but from a slightly different angle or perspective. And so when I watched that, and replayed that scene with the Hungarian, what stuck out to me was how drunk she had become. And I don't know if any of you have had to be that person who's like, you're at a function, but you really don't want to be there and you really don't know anyone. And so it's like, all right, I'll just have another glass of wine. Okay, I'll talk to someone, but okay, I'm just going to go, I'll go have another glass of wine. And so there is a bit of like, I could kind of relate to that. Like things can go left when you're like, oh, but I will say not ever at a work-ish, kind of function. That's a little different. But when we talk about that exhaustion and how many times those scenes were probably played out, it gives a different tone to, well, how drunk was she? Was she actually drinking? That said, when he says, why would such a beautiful woman, who could have any man, like he's making it clear, right? You're beautiful. You can have any man. Why would you choose? Why would you want to be married? So again, you called it will, and I have a theme of duty. Like my thread from the beginning was there was this theme of duty. We have to go to these parties, even though we don't want to, because it's going to help promote business. Then there's like, I'm dutifully married. Like we're committed, and we don't cheat on one another, and we don't do these things because we're duty bound. But then there's constantly this questioning, and someone else will question him. Actually, he's questioned many times, and tempted, we should say, many times, which also connects with the idea that the level of discernment. While she didn't do anything, she was tempted and was really close, whereas he was tempted and also, pulled away appropriately. But it made me think also of Bereshit and the idea of the moment that that she took a bite of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and her eyes are open, and then it's like, oh, we know that we were naked. So then that's when the shame and the hiding and all of the deception comes in. And once we're done with this scene and all that happens here, once they return home, that's when the shame and the hiding and all of the, the spiraling begins to kind of escalate. So
yeah, I don't. So in the same vein that she meets Sandor Stavros, there's also Nick who knew someone at the party. I want to call the party, and his name is Nick Nightingale. So the name alliteration for both of these people that they meet and have these interactions with didn't escape. And I thought was like, well, is this a way so that we remember these characters, right? And how they connected to Alice and Bill. And then there's also like, what's in the name? Like Akoti Murray, you said like all those S's, like, that's the snake. And then I thought, okay, well, Nick Nightingale, his role is music. He's there. We meet him. He's playing the piano. His last name is Nightingale, and all he does, we only see Nick at night. Even though Nick at night, we only see Nick at night. And what are nightingales known for? They're very nocturnal. They're known for singing at night. Like, yeah, sometimes you hear them in the day, but they're known for their song and their contribution of music in the evening. Real quick before you go,
check the chat.
Yeah, that. Yeah, we're gonna get into Master Menelik says, "I know I heard Mozart. Probably I don't remember. I didn't like it." He says the opening theme song seemed to play whenever they were living on autopilot and go with their social mass. Yeah, and I think that was the waltz.
That was the dream. That was the prompt about the dream.
Yeah, and I think that's the end credits song too. Like after a while, it goes into waltz number 2. Popeye. Who says something about Popeye?
I don't know.
Well, maybe it'll come. The story is very similar to Lolita. Yes, I think we're gonna touch on that when we talk about Mr. Milich and his little shady self in the rainbow shop with the 2 cross-dressing men. I think at that time it would have been referred to as cross-dressing.
Kubrick actually places a clue with Sandor because something I was researching, actually, it's a play on an African who was the head founder of some sort of pedophile ring and some sort of church. And I said to myself, well, it's 30 years, right? I think you were saying that, Ima Yakira Eden. It's 30 years of, this is research. It must be, if these are actual truths or facts that are being intertwined as clues and placed strategically, then yeah, it's literally research, and he's doing it to kind of funnel us in a sense. If we find the codes. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
You said that that it was when you said that it was 30 years. I'm like, and this was his final film. I'm like, it's kind of like it's his magnum opus. Is that what they call it? Like, his
your swan song.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that he knew of the book for 30 years, right? So you figure they started, like I'm looking at my notes. He hired the screenwriter, Frederic Raphael, in 1994. So that's when they began to write the film, right? And they started filming in 1995. I know that's when he met up with Tom Cruise and they had a meeting at his house. And actually it was Kubrick who suggested / instructed that his co-star be his wife. I imagine he must have known that was going to create a different type of intensity, even around like how sexual the movie would be and when, because there to me there was this play of energy. Even as they got dressed, they were getting dressed in 2 separate spaces within the room, but there was like a tension. And so if you would have, at that time in the 90s, if you would have seen the previews or you even knew the movie that it was connected with, there was almost like this anticipation of what's it going to be? How's it going to be? You know, what angle is it going to come from? But I don't know that this particular character was referenced in the original film, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't 30 years worth of preparation, which I know is your point, to kind of craft a particular type of character. And we, if we're able to get into it, because we're still at the beginning and it's like 9:30, but if we're able to get into it, I know that a lot of the newspaper references came from actual stories. So there's lots of real woven into it. So yeah, it's very crafty how Kubrick did what he did. I absolutely, I love it.
And I know I think we're gonna talk about Fidelio, but did Fidelio show up in any of these earlier scenes?
I don't know that because I didn't read the entire novel. Like I did like the clip notes, and then there was also a movie made out of it, but I wanted to not like retell that movie, so I didn't focus. But we did dig into the meaning of Fidelio. And I don't know, before I say it, does anyone in the chat, like, did you look up what does this word actually mean? I know, and I knew, we dig into every word and etymology. So I'm not going to say what it means just yet. I want to see if anybody else found it. But I guess I'll just share that scene since we're talking it through. So when he recognizes Nightingale as his former med school friend, he meets up with him later that evening, and they're discussing, and he tells him like, oh, that was nothing. I got a call, and I do this thing. I got this other gig that I do. And the passcode for the gig at the the freak off party is, or what is it called? It was called something else. I don't know, something.
The math ball.
No, we had such a cool name for it. Nah, I forgot what the name was.
Orgy?
No, it wasn't that. But when this ritual, the passcode is Fidelio. So now he has the passcode, but then he's told, well, you still can't get in because they're in full costume. And where are you going to get a costume from and mask at this hour of the night? But him being a physician who, goes to the home, he's got a patient. He's got a patient. So I leave it there.
Right. And we'll pick up when we get to that scene. And by then, maybe everyone would have
answered.
Answered at that point. So we're now, let's talk just a quick second about Bill and his interaction with the two young women, because it's clear that they were invited, but at the same time they're young women, unmarried, and he's, of course they're flirting, and he's invited to, where the rainbow ends. And you made a mention, you mentioned that a little earlier, Sister Yafe. So I wanted to know if you could, just like touch on that. I will say I noticed there's this ongoing connection. So I know we talk about a lack of connection between Alice and Bill, but at the same time, there is a serpentine connection that she has to him, because she could smell it in the air. I was about to flick my tongue. Oh my gosh. she smells it in the air. Like, she knows when he is engaging in conversation or even erotic interplay with other women, because she sees him instantly. She spots him. Even though she's having her own experience, she spots him speak. And I'm bringing it up because there are other parts in the story where, in the plot, where she interrupts any of his intentions, right? Sexual intentions. She calls or something interrupts, and she does that on more than one occasion.
I mean, well, the first thing is like this ball. okay, this is not the ball, the party, the holiday party. We'll call it holiday because it was not, well, I guess it could be called party, the Christmas party, because it was trees and lights and, you know, everything that said this is a Roman ritual everywhere. So I guess we can call it a Christmas party. It just had nothing to do with any god. Well, anyway,
God, that's for sure.
it was God, but it wasn't ours. So we'll say that. There was a lot of grooming going on. So Alice is being groomed and kind of, you know, tempted by Savos, you know, as Mr. Savos, and I'm about to call
Bill.
Nick. Bill is being tempted by, you know, a model, two models, and interesting, like the way the scene starts. She's like, "Do you know Nuala Windsor? Why on earth would he know her? Why on earth would he know her?" And then it was like, well, what was the point of telling him her full name? Like, what was that? Like, she just literally gave her whole government. And I thought, and you can see that one, Nuala is slightly younger than the taller model. And so in that, I thought, like, there's a grooming as well in that, you know. We see at the masked ball, like the ritual involves like young, nubile women, you know, when we see once the robes are removed. And so, you know, it's possible that one or both of them were one of these women, or at least, you know, attendees of that party, because there was a certain amount of women in that circle. But then when you go through the house / cathedral orgy scene, there's tons of men and women there. So, like, you know, they could have either been part of that, you know, center circle ritual, or just like attendees of the party. But they're literally trying to, as Alice is being, you know, as Sandor is trying to pull Alice upstairs to see the bronze art collection. Nuala and Miss Green Dress and Miss Minty Fresh, who's dresses like mint green, are trying to pull Bill, you know, also upstairs, or where the rainbow ends. And I see in the chat, Master Man like says the end of the rainbow was the name of the orgy. Possibly, unless you're saying it is, like, then give thanks for that addition. But yeah, to the end of the rainbow, because we know the next night it popped off, you know, up in the hills, probably someplace, Long Island or upstate. It's supposed to be. We know that this took place.
It was Long Island, based on when he does the retake, they show like the exit. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm like, it can only be like up, you know, up.
It was Long Island, and not even far up in Long Island.
Yeah, because you to those kind of estates pretty quickly.
Yeah. You know, I think the also, and I don't remember if it was Nuala Windsor or the one making the introduction, but when you think about the idea of grooming or preparation, they had been invited to these parties in the past. Mm-hmm. And so he had to have been known for doing favors. And with that, all it took was for either him or his wife to compromise themselves at this party for them to have a legitimate invitation to getting up under that rainbow, because they would have earned it, right? Mm-hmm. They would have earned the right to then be equally as culpable as as anyone else who would have been known or seen there. And so that's what I imagine that the prep was for. You know, you had this attractive Hungarian, you know, tall and salt and pepper hair, and he's sliding all these S's with his heavy, you know, accent to tempt her. Mm-hmm. And to, you know, and yeah, that whole bronze statue thing, I was just like, so he just allows you to like go through his home and show his art collection. Clearly this is a setup. Like, clearly there's been some other kind of parties happening up in that house. Okay. Mm-hmm. But that was and when I'm referring to the grooming with the models, one of the models actually said, "You were really helpful to me on a photo shoot."
Right.
So there's this like, we've been trying to intersect and connect with you all for a while, maybe because he looked young, fresh, and green, if you will, right? Because like when you think about when you think about Sandoval, like they were kind of like old, right? And not that that's not distinguished and sexy and whatever to whomever, but Tom Cruise and his wife, well, the two characters, right? They were a little naive. So there was an innocence there. So they may not have been perceived as the models were, right? Or as they refer to prostitutes and whores. They might not have been viewed in that light, but like, oh yeah, this is some new blood that we can have in the inner circle to also enjoy, because they weren't just enjoying the naked females, they were enjoying one another as well in that orgy.
Right.
So it seemed to me like this was all very strategic and layered, and like Chief talks about, like this was a long plan. Like, is that the term? Like this is the long game. So yeah, that was some of my thoughts about all of that.
I was just going to say, Sandor was very old world, like especially the 90s, but he was still very old world, even just the way he moved, the way he talked. It was like, did you just step off the set of Casablanca? Like, what's going on here? Like so that idea of like, the older, it's kind of like what we said before, like the recruiting, because we need young blood, like the stars, like, like, well, let's get some young blood up in here. Because also, like, we have to do things with a lot of older people. Maybe if we can get some younger ones up in here, it'll make it more bearable, or whatever was going on.
Well, that's who they wanted sexually. They wanted the ones that they knew were being compensated to be there, right? But they also wanted those who they're actually attracted to. And, and she's married, and I can have her. And I know she's attracted to me because she's clearly attracted to me here publicly on this dance floor. So if we can compromise one of them, then they're both coming to the party. And then I'm definitely going to have her. So it's kind of like there's a whole other story that's happening, I imagine.
Happening there. Strangers No More, because that was the song that was playing at that point. Strangers in the Night. We ain't going to be strangers no more.
No, they're going to be very familiar.
Well, if we're talking about, like, we're covered women, so let's talk about, like, just we don't have to talk about it because we're still on scene. What now? So
what are we talking about?
When you talk about having her, he had her on the dance floor. That dance.
Oh yeah. That's why I said publicly.
Right. That dance was like your whole bosom on,
chest,
like
in her ear. Like,
it's clear at the angle. I'm like the box is just like,
oh yeah,
exposed. Everything is just like given away to someone else. He had the opportunity to actually assess everything, right?
Wait a minute.
Sex happens in the mind. He got it in the mind.
Wait a minute. Sex happened when he picked up her wine glass. She said, "Excuse me, I think that's mine." He looked at her, said, "I know," and puts it to his lips and drinketh from it.
Yeah.
There was an exchange fluid.
Yeah, of course.
It's kind of like, this is what we're doing, and then you go dance with him.
Right. I mean, he several glasses of that. He had several sips from that glass. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't he drink in one shot? He didn't take a break.
No, he drank it all.
And he drank it all. Also, that's how she took her first glass of champagne.
It was. Yeah, it was. Just to kind of numb the pain of having to be there. But his was a different way.
Yeah, and I think like she drank it really fast. So it is possible, and champagne has a lot of sugar. So it's possible that she didn't have maybe another glass, like that downing of it really fast, like in a reality context. We know that they were delirious. So that might have been like how she appears so drunk so easily. But like it could have happened really quickly by drinking that fast, like really quickly.
Mm-hmm. Let's check in the chat.
Chat.
Yes. Yes, Master Menelik, I will no longer say diddle in this context. Apologies. When I heard his name, he said when he heard Sandor's name, it was a rap on old girl. He came through pushing all her boundaries. Yes, the number 5 is also prevalent in this film, dealing with different indifference, meditation, and freedom. Bill had no real sense of direction and only reacted to cues from his external environment. Yep, because we talk about like that, what the story that his wife tells him is what prompts him. That's what spirals him down, to that root chakra or Malkuth, and then he goes on from there. Top tier speaker says it was odd that she felt uncomfortable dancing with another man, felt comfortable dancing with another man, but was upset with seeing her husband with 2 models. We're going to get into that because that's where we have the feminist thread. It's like, what's good for the goose is not propaganda. Sit down. Safta Ahava says Sal was very comfortable trying to take Dr. Bill's Sandor. To take Dr. Bill's wife upstairs at the party. He seemed to be more than a friend of the host. Well, we know that from the party that they was loving.
He was one of those masked men. Oh, please.
The rainbow room. That's the rainbow room. This whole thing was the rainbow room.
I beg to say that he was one of the men in purple.
I wondered because we didn't acknowledge that. We spoke about the black and the red. I'm like, wait, but there were 2 in purple who assisted, with the right and left hand to the cloaked red, right? To the red cloak. So, and that's touching. We know purple is that royalty anyway. Yeah, go on.
Yes. Alice is heavily driven by her internal space and a level of dissatisfaction with her current situation.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yet refused the stability she likely married Bill for. Yeah, that was so. That's what the argument. That's what started this whole journey. It was like you started an argument for nothing. You live.
Wait! Don't go to it yet. Don't go to the argument.
I'm like, I was about to go off. Master Menelik says, meanwhile, their daughter peeped that there was game being played and she keeps trying to play her parents to get more stuff. Oh, yeah. Oh, I watched the movie. What time? Can I stay until you get home? Yeah, okay. All right. Whatever. Roz handle it. Master Menelik says she ain't no Santa, so she kept placing her Amazon orders with the people who she knew would actually pay for them. Popeye, the naval officer.
Popeye, I saw that. I was like, oh no.
Right. What do you call naval
Popeye the Sailor Man.
Popeye the Sailor Man. The Popeye the Sailor Man, he lives in the garbage can. Did you sing that song?
Yeah.
Okay. I realized that's not the words, but I don't know how those ended up words in certain circles. Anyways, their relationship seemed a little shady, especially when the doctor and his wife said they really didn't know anyone at the party. Yeah, because
they knew their patient.
They knew their
and
patient.
That's the thing. But if you think about it, I was thinking about it. If you're a part of an elite organization, at some point, how do you recruit? You recruit based on, and it's kind of like the example that I gave earlier. You recruit based on who does you a favor, who can you trust with this information, who can you even say, hey, this is what I'm about, come through. It has to be someone that you've established some more than some trust with. So this was a recruitment strategy. So it wasn't suspect, in my opinion, it wasn't suspect that they were there. They were there they thought they were there to network and kind of, to build his practice. But
it was network, all right, but just not for a house called.
They were there to be networked.
Network, right?
By the collective, by the net. They don't work them.
And that's the same way, because we hear, when he says, he introduced Nick Nightingale to them.
Right.
So he might have been playing piano for him or doing something. It's all about who.
Right.
It's not about what you know.
Well, I found it interesting that Nick Nightingale had a whole family elsewhere. And so it becomes everyone here has been commissioned for a cause, you know. And it is funny, Sandor reminded me of that old ancient vampire. Like he had that vampirical
Oh
energy.
yeah.
It was just like clear.
Yeah, that's what I meant. He was like out of his time. Like he was very, he did look like he did. Very like and almost hypnotic, right? Like when you're hypnotizing her. And
Right.
kind of I'm going to a film, sorry, the Jungle Book. I don't know if you ever seen that, and it is the
The
Disney
snake.
where Ka hypnotizes Mowgli
Yeah.
with her eyes.
But that's what's happening. You're saying she's drunk, she is, but there's neuro-linguistic programming actually happening as he's speaking to her. You see her being pulled into his world, like you see it happening. She clearly had something else happening with her. Like
he
watch
lulled her. He lulled her. I mean, and even at the end, like when she caught herself, it was almost like a full body, like she like fell in and like lingered and then kind of like it was like a breath had to, come from a breath came from somewhere to kind of revive her and bring her back. So yeah.
Master Menelec says, I heard Fidelio and thought fidelity.
Thank you for that.
Naya says from Latin, fidelo means faithful.
Faithful. That's it. That's it. Ding, 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 ding. Faithful.
Right. I wonder if they were trying to initiate them into this. Yes, that's what we thought.
Yeah, definitely.
Grooming. This was the grooming party.
Yes.
Or the big shebang the next night. Literally, never mind.
So mature you are. So mature. As I laugh. Like I immediately get the joke. Maria at least keeps the straight face. Like, I will not partake in such foolishness.
Interesting that fidelio means faithful, and that they were playing that Romanian priest. Didn't we talk
about we talked about that.
So come to think of it, where I thought, okay, maybe I thought something different. Yes, we talked about that. That it's about faithful and that whole, because another theme that we see here is like reflections and mirrors, right? We see that like in the beginning when Nick first. Why do I keep wanting to call him Nick? Nick is the piano player. Bill starts his journey, but then there's this constant, and we see it in the very beginning where they give us the reference when Alice is looking into the mirror. It's that whole idea of like the dreamscape and like the backwards reality. That idea of like them being in this ritual playing music backwards that's meant for something totally opposite of what they're doing.
Right.
Oh yeah, and the promotion of infidelity when it comes to marriages and respecting them, like, because both parties, Nuala and Minty Fresh and Sandor were trying to get Alice and Bill to like break that fidelity, like break their, like as you pointed out, Amy Akira, like the duty that they had to each other, just totally do away with it,
or just be faithful to something else, right? Have a different faith. And to come under the religion or the ritual that is whatever they were doing under that rainbow. So it's like you could be faithful to this or you could be faithful to that. You can make a choice.
We hear faithful and fidelity, and we instantly think the church or what is Christian, and it is perfectly normal for some people to have to be faithful in other things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm gonna try to skip through. Oh, was it the Hokey Pokey? Is that what we're gonna call it? Trying to bring the Royal Order of the Hokey Pokey.
No, but I like that.
I do like that.
That wasn't it.
The Royal Order of the Hokey Pokey. The Anu Radio, that's a deep observation you share. Yes, about the music. Whole lot of ritual going on. Yes. She dang near had her hand on his.
Yeah, she did. Absolutely. Yeah, that whole thing. I was just like, when is Bill gonna walk in? Because they about to do something on the dance floor. Like, somebody better stop somebody.
They were doing it. They just had their clothes on. It was
right.
just like Bill was having those reveries and those imaginations. That's what was going on the dance floor. They didn't need to have any clothes on. It was happening.
All right. So let's see what happens after this whole.
So thank you, because it's like, yeah, we just had the overdose. We haven't even left.
We didn't even get to the overdose. Like.
Right. So we're at the scene of the overdose where I will say we see. So actually, it starts with Bill, having a conversation with the two young women, and he's interrupted or pulled away from this seduction by I think it's Victor's butler, right? I can't remember his name, but Victor actually welcomes him at the door, right? At the door of this palatial bathroom, because I can't imagine a bathroom. Yeah, it's just like, this is huge. It's decked out. It's, it's odd as well, because I noticed that in one scene there's a red phone, but then the phone is replaced by paraphernalia. And so I'm like, well, what was the reason for replacing it? Because Kubrick doesn't do anything. Yeah.
Oh, come on. The red phone. The red phone in the Oval Office. And another, I don't know if it's funny, but at least I know in a hospital system that I've worked in the executive suite, there's always a red phone. And that's like the phone that no matter what, if everything else goes down, this particular landline gets you directly to like central office in case of a real life, like serious emergency type situation. And so that red phone to me always symbolizes like danger.
A lifeline.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Isn't it the same for like the fire, right? Like if I don't know, I guess all hospitals do that. You have a team that's designated on each floor to like help escort everybody out, and then it's that red phone that's supposed to be able to work.
It's the command center. Yes, command. Yeah, the incident commander is that kind of. Those are the people who take posts.
Red phone.
In the elevator. That's a red phone too.
Red phone.
Yeah, true that.
There's some other oddities here, but of course I'm saying oddities, but they are symbols. It's symbolism. We have the picture of a pregnant nude woman on the back wall, and every time we see Victor speaking to what's his name, Bill, we see that image in the background, and it's almost like the girl who's slumped in the red chair again, burgundy of course, but that's a shade of red. Like, it's similar. She's slumped down in a similar way, and so I wonder about the correlation between the way she's slumped and also the way the woman who is nude in the picture is slumped. Well, not slumped so much, but she's just kind of like laying there. But what I wanted to point out was Victor actually greets Bill at the door with the same phrase that his wife greets Bill and Alice when she opens the door at the beginning of the scene. It's the same phrasing. Thank you for coming. Welcome. I think that's the way it went. But I just found it interesting that there are patterns being repeated down to the language that Kubrick is using, patterns being repeated, not just symbolic representation and color, but even language. And I found it interesting too, because the young woman was naked in this scene, but Bill is able to do his job, right? It's clear that he's not I do not see him even, stall or, get distracted by her nudity at all. And he takes on a very interesting fatherly role, I think, the way he asks the questions of her and tries to call her name. I think he calls her Mandy at some point, but her name is Amanda. So there, there are just lots of a lot of symbolism. But I think this piece is also important because it helps to prep us for the argument that he and Alice has, because he's kind of saying, yeah, I'm doing my job.
Right.
As a
Yeah.
doctor, this is what I need to do. And no, I don't see every woman as an opportunity for sexual experience.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking, like, when you said, I'm like, yeah, he's a doctor. He sees naked bodies all the time. At this point, it's become like, okay, whatever. It's kind of like, well, same thing, gynecologists, OBGYNs. This is what they see all day, every day. Everything is not an opportunity for sex or lusting or having, like, unhinged thoughts about what you want to do to people. It's a profession. And just like when she's talking about, oh, when you have, her breast, she didn't use the word breast, in her hand. I'm like, no, she's probably thinking, like, don't find any lumps. Like, and then the next words out of his mouth was like, she's probably afraid of what I might find. I'm like, yeah, because, and I'm just, as a woman, like, thinking about, like, when you're in the doctor's office, that's not what's happening. It's like, don't find anything. That's all you want. Don't find anything. So everything.
But to me, it spoke to her own, like, guilt and
Mm-hmm.
her own fancy, fantasy, desires, if you will. And even her exchange on that dance floor, because at no point did anybody, bring to his attention what she did. I, I don't even know what I would do if the man drank my whole drink. Like, I just feel, okay, I gotta go to the bathroom.
Hey, like, pull one of these. Like,
like, that's when you got to walk away. Like, I'm just gonna wait at the car, like, or wait by the car. I don't know, wait by the ballet. But
you select the crew.
You don't dance with him.
There's weirdos in here. We gotta go. It's time to go. There's
You
weirdos.
don't, yeah. But I think one thing to consider, and someone touched on it already in the chat, there are times when the story, like, makes it clear that there's an ebb and flow in and out of dreamscapes. And so that's a consistent thread with the original film, because the original film, in fact, was like, it acknowledged that these are a series of dreams. These erotic experiences are dreams that are coming as a result of, all of what had transpired prior in the story. And the same thing can be said here. What happened? What?
I'm sorry, chat. Yeah, out of control.
Well, I mean, it's an out of control film. What do you mean?
Yes. Dust it off your shoulder.
Yes, he did. I'm telling you.
He's like, took out his fangs. Right.
This is a good one too, Naya. That's a good catch. You had to be faithful to the network.
Yeah.
That's a good,
absolutely.
That's a good one. Aki Ramik pointed out something that was really key. He was the only one wearing white, and he actually is always wearing a lighter color when he's in the scene. He's wearing a white jacket at both parties, and when he's in the Sonata, he's wearing a gray suit next to Bill's dark, coat and suit. Yeah.
So you brought up the dreamscape again, and I think it's important to also realize too that maybe what's being underlined too is the brain does not register a difference between dream state and what is reality, and so they kind of merge, and to some degree you do see that merging happening even in the film itself. Like, you as an onlooker, I'm like, well, where does the dream end and the reality, actually begin? And so maybe there isn't a difference. Okay.
Yeah, it's and I wrote down the comment. Somebody said that it's like Bill in certain scenes had no sense of direction. He didn't have a sense of direction, and that wasn't, like, I imagine that was intentionally depicted that way, because it was in those moments, or even his wife, because in those instances, that's when, like, when Alice is literally swirling, on the dance floor, there's almost like a lack of control. And I know we were talking behind the scenes, and the idea was like, these weren't even lucid dreamers, right? Because when you're lucid dreaming, you can navigate, you know what's happening even in that dream state. You know, like, no, this is not real. I can go ahead and I can change this. I'm the master of this universe. You know. And they clearly didn't. He didn't have that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There was something. Is this the one you're talking about?
Oh no, it was said earlier. I wrote it down. Yeah,
okay.
Someone was talking about Bill having no sense of direction, but I wanted to wait until we got to the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Right.
and needed to wake up. That's another reference to it. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But she was always asleep because she was the one having the visions that needed to be brought forward. So in spite of, like, she definitely, you know, presented with that feminist theme of just, I mean, she was just belligerent, you know, and we haven't even gotten to that scene. But
so take us there.
She was the seer.
Yeah, I was gonna say, then we gonna
take
be
us
in.
to the scene.
Okay.
We gotta move.
So yeah, I know, because we didn't even get to that stuff. So all right, so now they're home, they're unwinding. I don't recall if it's the next day or if it's just that night, but they're smoking, they're relaxing. Say it again. Go ahead.
I think it was the same night.
It was the same night. So then this is like a lengthy night. So she goes from, so now she's already drunk so she's intoxicated. I'll just put it that way, whether it was the libations or the man or both. She's intoxicated, and she actually goes to the medicine cabinet and begins to prepare for them to smoke. Which I thought, you see how nicely I did not say roll up, not one time.
That's exactly. I'm laughing. I'm like, look at her, like skip around the whole.
Yes. She prepares for them to smoke, and as soon as they do, you can almost see the vibe shift in the space. And she proceeds to make some inquiry about where he slipped off to, and, you know, what it was all about. And it was I thought she had a lot of audacity, considering what she divulges in the end. It's like, how dare you? How dare, number one, how dare you, like, shut up. At some point he needed to give her a shut up. But so that's the scene we're at. So where do y'all want to take it?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You mentioned earlier, you mentioned it was guilty, and all I could think about is Bob Marley's song "Guiltiness Rests on Their Conscience." Because how do you even ask about where he slipped off to? Where were you?
She didn't even have to slip off. She was
but yeah, she slipped into an altered state of consciousness in Sandor's arms, that's for sure. Right. You know what was happening there, and so you asked that. But and somebody else mentioned, you know, ideas of feminine ideas of feminine rhetoric in there, and you do see that because at one point her argument is, you know, it's always, you know, men do this and men do that, stuffing men into a category of, you know, just, you know, overly over sexual, you know, beings, and that's all they think about. But she also, you know, I think she's kind of saying, well, if you feel that way as men, what about, you know, me? I'm a woman. I feel that way. Almost saying we're equal. You know, they're saying that without saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the idea that she's like way more complex than he's putting together. And he said, no, I'm sure of you. Isn't that what you want? You want your mate to be sure. And then she was so offended by it. Like, oh, you don't know anything. And so now I'm going to tell you about this fantasy that I had about Popeye. And you know, and through it, I started to question, like, is it a fantasy or is this a confession? You know?
Right. Because how far does a fantasy go whereby you decide that if you can have him, you'll leave it all behind.
Mhm.
Your mate, your child, like everything.
Mhm.
Number one, how you know he's gonna want you?
Mhm.
But then it speaks to the fact that this is your fantasy. And it's based on your mate saying how sure he is of you, which again takes it back to the idea of Hawa, right? Like maybe the perception was like, she's good. She's from, she's coming from me. Like she's coming from my rib. So I don't have to watch everything she's doing. I can trust that she's going to, advise me properly or give me the right feedback. And no, you shan't, and you can't.
Adon was asleep when.
That's right. She should have been when lay her behind down too. That's the whole point. Go to sleep too. Lay down. And that's what he should have told her. I think that's what I said behind the scenes. Like he should have said, Alice, just lay your rabbit behind down. You're drunk, you're high. Go to sleep.
When she started laughing, it should have been like, all right, lights out.
Right.
I'm going to you sleep.
That laugh was, yeah, I couldn't place it. I didn't even know how to describe it. That laugh,
I thought I was like, this is not good acting. But like you said, it could have been delirium. That's where it was.
She was out of it.
Like, what?
When she stumbled over to the wall and sat on the floor, like under the window, that's when it hit me. I said, what is this? This isn't bad acting. Like, either she's really drunk and high or they're really exhausted.
I think.
And when I did the research, I said, okay, it makes sense now. Yeah. Like he worked them until they produced something that was consistent with the vision. So
yeah, I was like,
and I agree with.
I was like, oh, please stop. Like I was getting upset. I'm like, yeah, the laughing fit. Now I was like, this is weird. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
crouching, just last piece, like even her crouching over, and that it was very, it felt almost like she was moving into like an animal, I don't know, she was taking on some sort of primal, very animalistic nature. She crouched over and was just, I didn't know what to think of it or to make of it, but it felt very much like
oh man, I don't want to sing it. Dun, 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 dun. That's all I'm gonna do. That's the song. Of course, Aki, he's gonna come through with the musical interlude.
That was a good song, Blackstreet.
That is not the original, girl.
okay.
Move on.
90s.
All right.
We're 90s kids. We think everything is great.
What is she talking about?
So the next scene is, I guess, a day in the life of, right? We get to see what happens in Bill's daily life, what Alice's life is like, and we get to see some of the reality of what she stated to Sandra earlier, where like she's talking about her art gallery going under pretty much, and what is she doing all day? We get to see her interaction with Helena as well too. And we get to realize that there's a woman with a lot of time on her hands, and we know what they say about idle hands, I guess. So her mind is just like, I'm just gonna
fantasize all day. Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, I think you get a sense of what both of them are up to and doing. But what I thought was most interesting was kind of what happens thereafter, like that evening,
Mm-hmm.
Because
I'm sorry. No. I'm so sorry. I said it was the same night. We reversed it. So that whole argument scene was.
It was the following night
after we see the day. Yeah. It was that night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, wait, what happened to Lou, the patient? Because then we got to start the
Right. So that's when he gets the phone. It's in the middle of the fight that they get the phone. So right after the confession of, well, how sure are you really? Are you really sure? How sure are you? And then it's like, well, I'll show you that I'm not the dutiful, right? Faithful wife that you believe that I am. I had this filthy, filthy fantasy and I was willing to give it all up. And you could see him spiraling as she's telling him this story, as she slowly and painfully describes every single little detail, which was utterly disrespectful. I mean, yeah, I won't say what it's worthy of, but it's worthy of something. Yeah, to put her to sleep. But so that happens, and then the phone rings, and Bill gets word that one of his patients transitions, and that he should go to the home and see about the welfare of the man's lovely and bereaved daughter.
Right. The daughter.
What's her name? Marion.
So yeah. So he gets there and we see Marion, and immediately she looks like his wife. She sees like Alice. And they're going through this whole very pretentious conversation. I don't know if y'all thought that. I thought the conversation was pretentious, and I didn't really think that he actually cared. He was just going through emotion. Oh, I got to, because also Alice done, put him in a headspace, so he had to get out the house. So
first of all, he was high.
Oh right, yeah, that's right.
Like
he was
everything high. That transpired.
Well, I kind of busted that with the argument. I figured he came down out of the sky with the argument, but I don't know. Anyway, but he gets there and he has this like whole pretentious conversation. You see the Christmas trees again, and Marion looks like his wife. And then as they're having this whole conversation, she also has a confession, and it's very similar to what his wife just told him. But she actually acts out her fantasy, with her confession. She literally mauls him with her mouth, and is like, "I just want to live near you. I don't really want to be with my fiance." She doesn't. There's that.
Wait, but before she does that, what does she do? She tells him how wonderful her life is and how she's engaged to be married, and he's a doctor too. She's trying to make him jealous. She's trying to show him that I've got value. I've got value, and there's something to want here. Plus, there's also the implication that I got all of daddy's money now.
Yes.
Right? So there's a lot being said.
Well, he has a wife. So we don't know, because she was like, "Oh, I tried to call my wife."
But come on, that's his one child who was there just to care for him. So I'm sure some of the money, is left to her. But she was painting a picture well in advance of the truth. Like she was telling a tale way in advance of the truth. So the story, because in the end, that's when she says, "I don't really want to marry him." But you literally just said, "We're engaged to be married. Did you know?" No, I don't know. I'm here to do my job.
Temperature to see whether or not he respected Carl enough to do what she wanted to do.
She didn't care about respect. She cared about whether you were enticed by me enough to.
That's what I mean, if you don't care about him, then we can do this. She's like, "Did you know him?" She's looking at him like, you met him before, right? Trying to.
That was to make him jealous.
That
was for him to say, "Oh yeah, I remember him," or I didn't think that was at all. It all felt like her making her little web to try to snare him.
Unsuccessful. So then I keep wanting to call him Tom because he looked like Tom Cruise. He did like a taller
Carl
version, but his name was Carl Thomas.
I thought I can't remember her name. The woman y'all talking about, the daughter. I can't remember.
Marion.
Marian. Sorry. So Marian actually helps them to try to make Alice's point about the fact that he could never be servicing all of these patients and the women too, and not be in a sexual space or think about, intimacy. And so I just found it interesting that she would make that left, she just made a beeline for, give me some right now, actually. But I definitely found that there were parallels, and considering this scene happens like right after their conversation, and Alice kept insisting, no, you can't be, pretty much you were saying, you can't be playing with women's nipples and not having, sexual thoughts. And of course, the woman can't be that. And then, like this woman proves her point to be true. Because we don't know if he was the family doctor. Do you understand what I'm saying? You don't know if he served her in some capacity as well, too. I don't know.
But you also don't, but Marion also proves the other side of the coin as well. Proves Alice's point that, how do you know you can trust me? How do you know? As soon as Carl showed up, she was back to dutiful, grieving daughter. Hello. So in that scene right there, it showed duality, which we know, Kubrick is known for, like being able to kind of give all of those layers. So she acted out the entire scenario.
She did.
No, you know what? He thinks you're dutiful, but I know you're not. You were just throwing your tongue down my throat, and I wasn't even interested. Just like the wife was fantasizing about a man who made eye contact with her and went about his business because he wasn't even interested, even though you're holding on to a fantasy. She's holding on to a fantasy as she walks away. Well, he walked away, but she's looking like, call me. Please call me. So it's I can see both sides.
Don't despise me. It's too late for that. You showed yourself. You don't despise me.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
Oh wow. Yeah.
It's like, no, you're despicable.
Yeah.
So yeah, that scene was interesting. And that was consistent with the original film, the original book.
I wondered if in the scene, and maybe this might be a Kubrick move, we talked about like the doppelgangers. So Marion and Carl were a mirror of Bill. They literally, like, physically looked just like them, like, the tall blonde or strawberry blonde, and the kind of geeky nerdy doctor, who's moving in rich circles. Like, he's a math professor, and here she is, this rich heiress, in how did they even like end up together? So like there's all of that, those little things that make you think, like the social climbing, right? Wanting to be part of, elite circles.
Even the death, right? So there's a death of like innocence, right? She killed a certain perception that she, being, the wife, Alice, killed Bill's perception of what she was with that confession. And so the father, the deceased father, could represent the death of truth. Like the mirror has been shattered, and now it's like I can't just look at what my fantasy of you is. I have to look at the truth, and the truth is I got this fantasy loop now. Like this is the truth. So yeah, I would agree.
He's now faced with, maybe he was sure of his own fantasy of her.
Right.
He didn't know the truth of her.
Yeah. Oh, there's some stuff in the chat. Okay.
And we did talk about that. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah, we did talk about
that.
Yeah. Gets side of the fence. He always experienced something jarring to wake him up. Yeah, she called, message or something. I don't know what all the laughs are for. Maybe it was the song. I could see Marion eyeing him since he came through the door.
Yeah. She was.
She was waiting for him. She
Yeah,
wanted
of course.
to come over.
I'm sure she's the one who made the call. Like, what does
Oh.
he actually need to do? Your pops is dead. What does the doctor need to come to do? I mean,
He wanted to do the hokey pokey over the dead body ritual.
Service her. That's what the call
right,
was.
hokey pokey offer number 1 or number 2. Well, number 3. Dang, jeez, a whole lot of offers for.
Yes, yeah. I figured she might have been wife number 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
Make him a good one. How long has? I think that's
exactly.
That's what those fantasy, those black and white loops, thought, scenes were about. It's like, what was she doing? Like, because he was plagued with that for a whole 4 hours, that whole time.
Throughout the film. Yep.
Yep. And so now that was, I mean, would you say like this is now the Marion and Carl with Dreamscape number 1, and then then he moves on?
Yes, I would. So what's in the next scene? What happens?
Oh, I'm reading all the little comments. So yeah, the next scene we're actually, let's talk a little bit about his movement down the hidden Rainbow Street, I would say, because he makes a couple passes along the same street, and we see, I think, some significant businesses. We see the Flying Burrito, we see the Mexican restaurant. Those are all, and I think they're helping to create the setting for where we are. But then there's I'm not sure why they included this, the second pass down the Rainbow Street, so to speak. We see him being bullied by these supposedly Yale students, and I'm not sure why, but I think it helps to show how throughout the film you do have all of the external experiences and people on the outside corralling him, moving him, pretty much controlling his life, controlling his thoughts, down to the imagination. For once or twice, I wondered if his wife planted that seed of doubt on purpose, as opposed to just sharing something, like this is my real fantasy, because you see it driving him. And those bullies kind of reminded me of everything else, all the other external experiences pushing him. And you mentioned it, Ima Yakira Eden. Someone said it in the chat, like he doesn't have will. He's like literally moving off of everyone is.
That's the root chakra. We talked about this a little bit behind the scenes. There were like two major pieces about like the bullying. Like, they were wearing Yale sweatshirts and jackets and whatever. And the one connection is like Yale is where we think about secret societies, right? Skull and Bones, elite secret societies. And then there was the other part, like what they were bullying him about. Like he's moving around in the village and they're calling him, like I said, names that you could now go to court for if you mention it. Right.
Yeah. And those, in some of my digging, that piece, the piece about them, that's where we had the name. We had I think it was the happy rainbow folk. That was what they were accusing him of being. And yeah, I remembered. I was like, we came up with a way to acknowledge that piece. And what it reminded me of, well, in my research, what I realized was that during that time, those were the rumors about Tom Cruise. His sexuality was actually being questioned. And I don't think it was the New York Post. I think there was like a magazine, those tabloid magazines, who actually indicated that not only was that his persuasion and interest, but also that Nicole Kidman was his beard. And so there was a lawsuit that, ensued, of course, defamation. But on top of that, I think I touched on it earlier, but Kubrick also like got into their heads and got into the mind and the psyche of his actors. And so a lot of what they say he did was find out about the idiosyncrasies of their union and the kind of things they do or experience behind the scenes, which actually made me wonder, well, I wonder if they said that they, smoke together or do these things or have had certain kind of conversations, because then that stuff was interwoven, that tension was interwoven into the film. So a scene like that, which would be seemingly random, like, right, like why did that need to happen? It was, again, like Akoti Mireya, I think she touched on, it was just like something like trying to knock him down, or like knock at not just the psyche of the character, but of the person, the actor as well, so that he can get deeper into character, to be more of what, of what Bill needed to be, or reflect anyway. Yeah. So
Right.
I guess
Oh, no, go ahead.
he said, okay. Oh, protector. Yeah. 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 That's a good point. Well, I mean, again, things are flipped, right? Everything is flipped. So it's interesting to me. It's like when you look at this film, recognizing that a lot of it is connected to these scenes are all dreamscapes. It's kind of like, oh, that explains the blue, that blue tint that's, that's persistently kind of washing over lots of the scenes. It's to acknowledge that, like, oh, this is a dream. Like, this is, there's like a haze over everything. But so as he's walking, he stumbles past a door, and it's a red door, and there's a young lady standing close to the door, which is interesting because I didn't know, I wouldn't imagine that you would bring the simps to your home. Like, I was like, who that is? This what they do? Not like, wouldn't the alley be better than your home? I don't know. I just imagine like the streets would be better than your house.
I figured her night might not have gone well, and she needed to do something before she went in. She took it in for the night.
Yeah, because she didn't even watch the clip. I guess it was
like
just
a night
confusing.
than she expected. Because I thought, didn't she get out of a cab and it was just like boom, like, oh, here, I'm gonna take. Plus, look, like the way he was dressed and the neighborhood that he was in, it's like you have money.
He looked like money, right?
He looked like money, so
right.
I'm there real quick,
So she's invited. I actually may not have her name.
Domino.
How did I forget that? Yes, I did remember. And I even have something I want to share about her name being Domino a little further into the story. But so he meets Domino, your neighborhood prostitute, and she was. And she invites him up to her apartment. And I thought it was interesting that the door was red. To me, I mean, yeah, there's lots of red, but this red was almost like red light district, like red lantern, a red light in the window kind of thing, but also red alert warning. Because as we'll touch on later in this story, it was a gift that he chose to not engage this particular prostitute and accept her offer for sexual favor. Even though ultimately he did still leave her with money, he also left her with, all of the other things that she carried with her. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, that was what it's called.
I think the encounter with her was almost, so I used to look at, did I interrupt someone? I'm sorry.
No.
Oh, I used to look at these videos over and over again of young, what do you call them? Oh my gosh. I don't know, competitors who place the dominoes in design, and they just like literally watch dominoes fall. So when I heard domino, I was like, domino effect, you are like, there's a beginning of maybe a spiral down towards something that happens with domino. As he enters the sea. Pardon?
Next dreamscape. Boom.
Right. It's next dreamscape. So I just found it significant. And then seeing also how well, I guess we'll get into, listen, we could keep moving the story along. Eventually we see that I think he revisits, this is after some other stuff, but he revisits Domino's house with some gift. I'm not sure what that was. Was it a cheesecake or something?
Like cookies. Like it could have been like, like the Italian cookies. Like it might, because I don't know.
The holiday cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what that was at that time, and to skip it, I guess we'll be skipping around, but at that time, he didn't actually know which of the women was the masked woman. And so what I observed is that he was retracing the women to figure out which one was the one who warned him, because it was almost as if he knew it had to have been one of the women that he just encountered.
Right.
And so that's why he went back looking for her.
Mm-hmm. That whole day was spent retracing his steps.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that brings us, I'm sorry, my chair. I think that brings us to, no, it doesn't, because we have not even gotten to the actual party yet. I'm ready to go to the Blue Gate and, like the whole, yeah.
Well, let's go there. Why don't we just go there, and if we backtrack, then we backtrack.
Well, he meets his friend. He meets Nightingale. He goes to, so after roaming around, he's like, he doesn't want to go home.
Because he's still having
which, right. Well, and the sad thing about it is, like, let's think about how many women create an environment in their home that their mates don't even want to return to. Like, that's a whole nother conversation. But he did not want to return home because of what she placed in that space and in the space of his mind, right? So he decides to, make his way through. He was already in the village, and so there are lots of jazz clubs and little underground. I actually think I know that one, because it's like there's lots of, anyway, like it's not literally underground, but you go down, like it's literally under the ground places in the village. But he goes there to hear his friend play. And that leads to them having a drink and a conversation at the diner right next door after the set. And that's when he shares about his side gig. And right as he shares about the side gig, he gets the phone call. And it's interesting because he answers very, like, he's clearly a servant. And like, he's clearly, like, it wasn't just like, oh, I have a gig for you, like, show up here. The way he answered was like very nervous and anxious. And, he grabs the napkin and writes it down all frenzied. And so it almost sets the tone for, like, he shook and he can't mess this up. Mm-hmm. And then that's relayed when he tries to convince Bill to not come. He's like, you don't want any part of what this is about. But I imagine he's trying to get that out of his head. And so, in some instances in a movie, you'll see a person try to get something out of their head by having a drink or by smoking or by doing anything that's going to get whatever they don't want on their mind off. And in this instance, it was, I'm going to this sex party. I don't care what you say. I got the passcode. What else do I need? And so the other thing that he needed, which we touched on earlier, was the passcode and a costume. Somebody should have told him maybe he, shouldn't have taken a taxi there, but that's a whole nother. And he had a Range Rover, so like I don't even understand why he had I guess he didn't want to bring his car, which might have been smart. Who knows?
But then he should have had the taxi drive stop before he got to the gate, or
so then he was just gonna walk up.
And
that would look equally as weird.
I mean, maybe, but
it was weird. So he so I'll just because there wasn't too much with that scene to break down with him, he and Mr. Nightingale. But so then the next scene is rife with analyses. I see you unmuting, and Koti Maria. Come through.
Yeah, well, so he goes looking for a costume, right, at the Rainbow store, is it? Or the hit
fashions. And isn't there a store called Rainbow?
Yes. Is. There was. There still is. I think it still is. Mm-hmm.
There still is. If I'm thinking about what you're thinking, because I don't know sometimes.
Rainbow. Yeah. What? Don't even try it.
Right. But
she tried to act like I don't know, because y'all whatever.
No, I mean it could be rainbow, but it could be a rainbow. You see, you're talking about the village. So if you're talking about a village, then what types of stores are in the village, right? So if you say the rainbow store, then that's a whole other kettle of fish. So literally fish. So but I wanted to make a quick point because I had this in my notes that there at the Sonata Jazz Club, there is also a connection to another film that Kubrick did, where there's a sonata with the Duke of York in A Clockwork Orange. And I can't go into great detail, but it just goes to show that there are threads and connections between some of the films. And I don't know if he's just reusing stuff, but there may be something more there that I am not completely aware of. But we get to, I can't remember the name of the store owner's name, but
it's Millage.
What? Millage? Mr. Millage. Who turns out to be actually someone who moved in after Bill's actual client or patient moved away. So I guess he inherited the store as well. Fast forward to he eventually takes the $200 bribe and brings him downstairs. And I guess interrupting his pimped out daughter and these two cross-dressing Asians. $200 is, worth it. So they head on down to the store and they start pulling out stuff, and then you see what is his name again? I can't remember. He kind of Milch. Let's just call him Millie. So
we can call him the pimp.
The pimp. Oh my goodness. So he hears wrestling in the back, and he pretends as if he doesn't know what's happening, opens the door, and you see this young woman who eventually realizes his daughter. He says it's his daughter. He says it's his daughter.
That you're right. He says it's his daughter.
Yeah, she is his daughter. But at the same time, he curses the Asians out, but at no point does he No, he actually calls the daughter, does he call her?
He cursed her out too.
He did.
He cursed her out. He cursed her.
Right, and she, nude, runs and hides behind Bill, seductively at the same time, because she's flirtatious, I think. Yeah. She's flirting and playing and hiding and doing all of that. And of course the Asians are caught red-handed with wigs and everything. That I found that was absolutely hilarious. But that scene is really important because it connects. It allowed me, and it may not be what Kubrick meant, but there is a highlighting of pedophilia. And when we think about Alice and Alice's name being used as the female character, we go back to I'll go back to two of the lectures that Chief did, where he broke down a little bit of what Alice was actually experiencing, which is a sort of dreamscape as well too, during the, going down the rabbit hole and all of that. But the author, what I want to actually point out is that the author of Alice in Wonderland is actually Lewis Carroll. And Lewis Carroll was known for, well, eventually he was known for photography, but also as a mathematician. However, he had us in his studio, and they discovered a whole, I can't even remember, hundreds of photos. And amongst those photos was one photo that actually had everybody kind of start to question who he was and actually label him a pedophile. As within all those photos, they found several photos of young children and young girls. Particularly took interest in three girls, I think the sisters, and the youngest sister's name was Alice. So Alice in one, and let me just say, the photo that is not in question, the photo that kind of puts the valve is the nail, right? Kind of puts the nail in his coffin is the fact that it's a full frontal nude photo of Alice, who is a juvenile, right? And his sisters, Leona and I can't remember the other one. They also have photos in those stacks of photos that he had. So that's one of the things that I found was interesting. And maybe it's a stretch, but I don't think I don't think Kubrick does anything without thinking it through and making deep connections and allowing us to see those connections.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's exactly right. I think it is along the same thread. That scene was something about what hidden in plain sight. He has this costume store, where he sells like things that cover true identity, and also him being there is like, this lowly proprietor who's just trying to make a living with his daughter is actually supplementing his income with prostitution. So and you know what, like, again, after watching it several times, I'm like, they were bewildered because they're like, why are you acting brand new? That's what that was. You were acting brand new. What you mean? She told us to come. This is what we usually do.
Not only were we invited, there was, before they showed the people, there was Chinese food, there was soda cans, there were drinks. Mm-hmm. Y'all having a party. And I have prepared a space for you. Okay. I've even secured the gate, so ain't nobody going nowhere. Because remember, that gate, there was a gate, which I thought was so strange, but I'm like, oh, they're in the village. But after you come through the front door, there was a gate to get to the store before the door.
A cage.
Yes, cage. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's exactly door. Right, a cage door. So it's like, you can't just sneak in here. You had to have been invited. And that back room was prepared that way for a reason. He didn't need that. Some shopkeepers spend late hours and their home is far away. Your home is literally across the hall. Why did you need that sort of well-prepared back room? That was the room was being used as it was prepared, with costumes all around, to fulfill fantasy. Mm-hmm. So while I definitely didn't get that on the first take, like the first run through. Similar to, I think, what some of the shares were backstage, like on the second, it was like, oh yeah, like, look, like you can see like how this is all strung together. I know you touched on this, but throughout, there's also the theme of the mask and all of the different masks that the characters are wearing, or are choosing to wear. And so, his one mask is shocked father who's going to chase them out. But then, later on, we'll discover that his more authentic face is revealed when the lost mask, that has to be paid for, and the cloak is being returned. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
So let's see. So
And you know
after
what?
he gets,
There's like just because there's comments in the chat about like, yes, he pulled up in a yellow cab, but I wanted to touch on something based on like what his bill was forgiven, right? Like, and then also like he paid the cab to stay there. Master Menelik brought up earlier like the number 5, and I'm going back in my notes. I'm like, yes, he's right. The amount of money that Bill spent just to get to this party was $555. That number he spent 375, or would have, because he, at the end the bill was forgiven because he discovered that Miss, who we think is his daughter, that would have been 375. What he the cab was 74.50, but he said I'll give you 80, and then he said if you wait for me I'll give you $100. So 180 and 375, 555. He spent that much like with nothing, without blinking, just to get to this party.
just to clear his mind. Yeah. Yeah.
They're repeated numbers, and that's a pattern because 11 shows up too, and the ones, because I think there's a truck with a name on there that's equivalent to Aleph, which is 1. And there a couple of times we see a street numbers. I think it's East 11th on there. And the number of young women in the ritual, I counted over and over again. I was like, why isn't this an equal number? 11. I kept counting. I was like, no, they're missing one. Why? It should be 12. This is where my mind is at. It's 6, 6. What do you mean? 11. And 1, 1, it's so they're repeated master numbers actually showing up to be correct.
Yeah, I had to literally put my hand over my lips. I was like, oh, okay, don't get into numerology. Don't do it. Don't do it. I'm not. You said master numbers. I'm going to leave it there. Yes. Yes. Yeah. All right. So now he's in the cab. He is parked up somewhere on Long Island in front of this palatial estate with the gate and all. And he walks through the gate. I mean, at least he had the fortitude to ask the cab driver to stay. I thought that was at least smart. So he had a way of getting out when he needed to, even though they used it against him, which you touched on. So he walks in, and at the gate, he's asked for the password. Well, actually, I think they say, how can we help you? And he gives the password. And then he walks up this long gravel walkway that Rolls Royces and all sorts of really, expensive vehicles were parked along, and then walks up these stairs to this mansion. And again, before entering, he's asked for the password. And then he goes in, and there's a coat check. So he checks his coat, and he, affixes his mask and walks into, and is actually on the outside. So he shows up late, which I thought was, clearly you don't belong, because they on a clock here. And you're not a part of what they're doing. And that was made clear when you just stood off to the side while everyone else is kind of, on the periphery, and you're there by yourself, and didn't even try to blend in. Yes. And then he's super short. So he doesn't even I don't know. It seemed like everyone was towering over him, which I was just like, he just doesn't fit at all.
It's like, one of these things just don't belong here. He
right.
walked in with the mask on. I'm like, ding dong. When he stepped out of the cab, that mask should have been on. Nobody should have seen his face. I mean, we learned later that they rummaged through his pockets and figured out who he was. But I think if he had come up with the mask, and the cab would have given him away. But yeah.
They know one another. Let's be clear.
True.
They know one another. One of the, I know, Okoti Maria, you touched on that the fact that there were 11 women in that cipher. The piece that I thought was noteworthy was that once the women disrobed, they had no markings. There were no tattoos. There were no marks that would identify them outside of that space, with the exception of the fact that they were known by those men. And I mean, more than just the ways that they were known in the scenes, they clearly, their paths crossed outside of that threshold. But I thought it was interesting. One, sticking with your theme of pedophilia, I thought it was interesting that the women were, yes, they were very slim and their bodies were very young looking and not so fully mature. There were no buxom breasts, if you will. Like, yeah, the women had breasts, but they were quite small. And I thought that it all connected with the fact that, you know, these women needed to appear as young as possible, to be appealing. Although there were women in the crowd donning masks and cloaks. And so even for those women, these women needed to be maybe the opposite of what they were, or much more appealing for their mates. So
You know what I thought? Because yes, and even the way they show the women in their bodies from behind and the hips, like, you know, they show like the curvature, and I was like, these maybe, because we, like, again, like you said, we see that there are women in the crowd there, because as we see the orgy scene, there's way more than 11 women.
right.
So I figured that this circle of women, this was their induction. This was their first time. That's why the need for the ritual. They were new. So
Right.
they being, you know, put, you know, kind of, this was fresh for the picking, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Another one had probably already gone through their ritual and they were just in there, and, you know,
And they were sent. Remember, they were sent to specific men
Yeah.
in the crowd. So, but only Red Cloak knew who to send the women to, because he knew the masks. He knew who was who. So it's like, you go to him and you go to him and you go. So it was that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. That was a part of the ritual. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going back to who do you think the masked woman with all of the plumage was?
The
Because
wife.
it was Amanda.
I thought it was
Because Ziegler kind of says it at the end. He's like, "You even said it yourself. She's gonna need rehab. It was only a matter of time." So that was
Oh, not the one who volunteered. Not
yeah,
That's not who you're talking about.
I am talking about the
yeah,
one.
Oh yeah, that's
the one with the plumage. I thought that was
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's that. And that's, he even said it. He says, you know, well, the only thing that happened to her after she volunteered was she got screwed. Like, she had gotten her brains out, as she had gotten so many times before. So okay, that's why I said the wife, because there was another woman that was more in a more leadership stance, and I wondered who she was. And that's what I thought you were talking about. And I kind of thought perhaps it was the wife of what's his name? Victor. Yeah, I says, you know what? This is not something where no. One of the cloaked women who had like a really ornate mask, who seemed to be like commanding some things. I wondered who. There was one particular woman who stood out to me, and I thought maybe it was Victor's, or would have been Victor's wife.
I thought that if you're talking, so remember when the two were looking down from him at the balcony, and the one they call the Balta mask with the hat and the white, and it's open at the bottom, and then there was somebody standing next to him that looked like it could have been a woman, based on just stature. Like the person was smaller, and you know the body was different. Well, from what we could see under the cloak. But I thought that may have been Victor and his wife. If that's
okay. Yeah. That might have been it. But
someone
I
said that then his cloak was different. It was like shiny almost. It was a different material, so then it looked like a different black.
Yeah. I wanted to share something about the Red Cloak. And Chief actually touched on this during 2001: A Space Odyssey. He made reference to, Kubrick using different newspaper articles and weaving in stories. I want to find the gentleman's name here in my notes. But in, yeah, I thought I had it under news, but now I don't see it. But within the news articles, which we'll get into later, there is a connection with the red coat, the red cloak. And the person who's actually in the red cloak during the movie is Kubrick's personal assistant. And his name is actually mentioned in the newspaper article as well. And so it's kind of like making a connection to him and the in this movie and like what's happening, within the scene. So I thought that was interesting. So there's all these like little, kind of like how Disney films, there are all these little other things happening throughout to kind of make this story more colorful for those who know that those things are there. So he's here at the party. I thought the staff was interesting as well. The banging of this, the knocking of the staff as he walked, around, and also some of the positioning that the initiates took were like positions of submission. And so it acknowledged that, there's a hierarchy and I'm at the bottom of it. And so him then being able to designate, who they go to spoke to his ownership over them as a collective. Yeah, what does it say? In fraternal ritual, the women have it. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. And so, and that headship with the men, Victor speaks to that. In the end, when he calls Bill over, he says, I could have gotten into a lot of trouble as well. Like, I have to answer. Like, I introduced that, I think he called him a prick, that piano player. Like, I knew he was a dirtbag, and, I could have paid for that as well. Letting us know that while this may have been like, he may have been perceived as the top, all he was a facilitator for recruitment. So he was just doing his job, hosting a party so that funnel is bringing more bodies in. So it kind of showed that he wasn't as high up on the food chain as we might have thought. And he even says, you don't want to know who's at that party, like he was making it clear, like, I can't even name the names of these people. Which also acknowledges that they do know one another, despite the masks. So the masks are really just a formality or for fun.
It helps to I think it also helps to separate that hierarchy, because at a certain level of that hierarchy, they may know each other, but there may be people who are at the lower level of the hierarchy who will not have a clue who the red cloak and the purple cloaked man and woman or woman are. So I found that interesting. But he's, like Victor's also kind of giving Bill some realistic things to think about, because, we see Bill, completely enticed by the desire of the elite and the, who holds power. He wants to be a part of that. That's why they're going to those parties, year in, year out. So it's a good way to sober. Victor actually sobers Bill up in a sense. He's like, yeah, you see me and you see that I look like an elite, or maybe even, as you're saying, in your career, even at the top. But I'm not, like, I still have to answer to someone.
Yeah. And even the masks, though, that they did delineate hierarchy. You know, there was there were certain people who wore certain kinds of masks, so you could even tell based on the mask like what level you were at.
And one of the masks that, and I think you made reference, I can't remember the name of the mask, but I found that this particular mask had no mouth at all, which and very, very protruding brows. I can't remember the name. What was the name of it?
Bauta.
Bauta, right. Right. So that Bauta figure, I just find it is directly connected to dutifulness and faithfulness, because part of faithfulness is that silence, right? That being able to see and designate and call shots, but doing so with a closed mouth, right? So there was that mask had no mouth.
Also with that mouth, or with those masks, in spite of all all of what was happening during the entire orgy, there was no kissing, right? Like there was no, like that, it was mask touching mask. And so even that is like, okay, not only are we like, we're not like, our faces are not exchanging anything, which takes away, right, or gives more anonymity, or even a dehumanization. Like this is not the person, not because there's no kissing, but because my face is covered. Like you can't see if I'm happy, sad, elated, or grieved about what's happening, because you ain't got to worry about my face. That idea of fix your face or you don't look pleased is irrelevant. It doesn't even matter, because the only thing that's speaking is your body, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. All right. So
last thing. So as you shared that, I start to think about a segment that she shared on kissing and, the level of intimacy, and if I may say so, the passing on of energy and fluids and breath from one to the next when you do kiss. So that physical kissing, because we do see masks, but there's that passing on that we don't see. And I think that that's significant too, because maybe it creates a space of neutrality, or it allows for them to control the ritual, because it is, like it is ritual, like, sorry. But
absolutely. So he walks through the rooms and sees, lots of enticing acts. I think another giveaway was that, he doesn't engage or indulge in anything, which I think would be a huge tell in that environment for the most part, particularly if you aren't flanked by someone, which would be the person who invited you there, right? Or who, is accompanying you. So with that, he is approached by someone, as Akoti Yafe touched on earlier, that attempts to warn him. Actually, it's one of the young ladies, I think, as she's going up the stairs, she turns back and kind of, tells him, like, you don't belong here. And they see you and you better go. And she, actually she summoned another and to do something else. And as he walks around some more, this woman, what does it say? They knew he was. When he pulled up, yes. I know. So, go ahead. You're on mute.
I was saying, this is to you pointing out the colors of the cloaks and the masks. There is a way that he was supposed to posture himself when he encountered various colors. They allowed
right, because there was a system, right? And he should have known the standard.
And he didn't. He gave himself.
Oh, Cruz telling the secrets, bro. Abba Yada Ram. Heck, we don't know. We would have been like him. We like, hey y'all, hey.
Winding around like
yes. Hands in pockets, like, oh, what's going on over here? Take a
Yeah.
picture. Take a video. So as he's being warned, he doesn't take heed to the warnings, but instead, is really in the throes of fantasy and just taking it all in. And then he's warned again by the same young lady. And then she says, you're going to get us both killed. And he tries to even take off her mask, which is just so naive, in my opinion. Like, why? Like, she's going out of her way to assist you and to try to warn you. Like, if I see you, they see you. And, he doesn't take heed. He's quickly approached by two security guards who says, your cab driver is really upset. He needs to speak to you at the front door. But he's not taken to the front door. He's taken back to the main room.
End of the rainbow.
About to be the end of his rainbow. It's a bum rainbow. So then that scene, I was just like, is this gonna happen? Oh my, this is gonna be brutal. But he's taken to the main room again. And what's I thought interesting about him being brought back to that room is that the red cloak, the two purple cloaks, and many of the black cloaks are all there. So who gathered them? Or did they never leave that space? Because they were aware from the moment he walked in. So they allowed him to observe. They craft their plan. They check his pockets. They do all of these things to get their intel. And then they summon him.
Mm-hmm.
And when they summon him, they ask him for the password. He gives it. And then they ask him for the house password. They said, like, okay, that's fine. That's to get through the door. But what's the house password? But there was no house password. So as he kind of fumbles and says, I don't remember, which you would not forget that if there were one. He says he doesn't remember. And then he's told, well, there is no house password. And he's instructed to remove his mask, and they go through removing the mask, but up on the balcony, the one that we believe is Mandy is watching this entire exchange go down.
Oh my
God. Well, it was bound to happen.
That's hilarious. Okay, so
security. Where is security?
They went to sleep. What time is this? Like 11:15.
Yeah, it's 11:15.
So pretty much, he's threatened, and he's told to strip. And we can only imagine why he's told to strip and remove all of his clothes. And then the young lady who's warning him yells out from the balcony and says she will redeem him. And she was reminded of what that would mean for her. And she again reiterated that she will redeem him. And so with that, she was summoned down and he was excused out. And, pretty much told if he ever spoke of anything he saw here, they knew who he was. They had his ID and, threatened his family. Yeah, threatened his family. So we're going to try. I think we should try to move through since just looking at the time.
So he gets home. Eventually he gets home, and is that okay? Can I kind of jump to him getting home?
I think so.
And, yeah. And we realize, again, there's this crazy connection, because we realize Alice is sleeping, but is awakened, and I can't remember how, but is awakened and is able to, was actually sharing that she had first of all these fits while she's dreaming just look so unrealistic. I was kind of, I was trying to figure out why she looked so, it looked really strange. It did not look realistic. It didn't look like someone having a dream, right? And maybe there's a reason for that. But she actually shares with Bill that she too had a dream. She had a dream where she encountered, she was pretty much saying that she had a sexual orgy with a whole lot of men. Pretty much saying that, yeah, I was present in the experience or the dreamscape you experienced, but maybe in my own world. I'm not sure what that means. Can you remember what his response was? Because I cannot.
He didn't say too much of anything. I think he mostly comforted her. But I will say, when she shared that, following her confession, I honestly questioned whether she was a part of that entire ring, like fully in the flesh, like not in her dream. But then I kind of dismissed it because I'm like, well, he would know if his wife is like out every Thursday of the month, right? But it really just like it kind of planted a seed of, were you there? You know, did you have the babysitter? Were you participating in all of this? And maybe that's why you were so offended by him, claiming to know you and know what you would and wouldn't do. So it was just a question. Yeah.
I don't think that's far-fetched because somebody fished that mask out of the bag. So he was.
I know, because it didn't fall. Like he locked it up.
So I was like, oh, they done sent some goons to his house and da-da-da-da. He took it back the next day. It was 4 a.m. when he got home. By the time they went back to sleep, maybe 4:30, I don't know. But like in between, and he got to the diner, and it was in the dawning. So it only had a couple of hours had transpired before he got to, took the bag out of its hiding spot to leave the house.
Right.
Somebody fished that mask out. So I don't think that thought is far-fetched because I was like, who did it? I was like, I don't think it was.
And then left it on the pillow.
And she put it on the pillow.
Right.
She put it on.
Of course. So,
and I think that speaks to what her response was. The last two words of the film is like, when he said, well, what do you think we should do? Because we also don't know what he told her. We just see them talking. We just see them at the end of the conversation.
Yeah, he says he'll tell her everything.
He tell her everything. And then we see that, okay, he must have said what happened to him the last 24 hours. And then what she says to him in the toy store, okay, well, this is what we have to do next. I don't think that she was a stranger to that ring.
Yeah, I don't either. But to just touch on some of the other key points. So after he confesses, he does try to retrace all of his steps. And in one, like from one perspective, there's like he does a retake of this dreamscape. And so, there's the active, him actively revisiting every location, trying to look for his friend, only to find out the friend was, appeared back at his hotel, battered and bruised. But it also kind of knocked him down a notch. So in the beginning, he was this really, this prominent doctor to the elite. And the only time he needed to use the I'm a doctor card, if you will, calling card for access was when he went to get the costume from Milledge. But now in the retake, the redo of revisiting all of these scenes, he has to use the fact that he's a doctor to get information. So he is trying to use his status or his mask of being something prominent, if you will, in order to sway the commoners. So it starts with the gentleman. Well, really, it starts with the waitress at the diner, and that's how he found. Once he says he's a doctor, for some reason, the blood work. He doesn't actually have his patient's address, which is strange. But he's like, I've got some important blood work to make sure that I give to Mr. Nightingale. So she gives him the hotel address, the motel, wherever he's living. When he's there, then the bellman proceeds to say, after I think some money was exchanged and his physician card again. Yeah, well, he came in at 4:30 and he came with two men. He had a black eye. And then 30 minutes later, he checked out. But this was an extended stay type of hotel because he was there working. So there's questions about that. And he just proceeds to do a whole retake. So then it leads him to finding this newspaper article because he's being followed at that point. And so he walks up to a newsstand and I think the feature article says lucky to be alive. So he's lucky to be alive, but he's got this man like following him around, lurking. So I'll leave it there. Whoever wants to pick up.
I was saying, I think one of the major things I remember was the ominous music that keeps replaying during that piece, like where he's being followed. And it's so obvious, but I don't know if he was putting the pieces together. I wasn't sure if he's trying to revisit those places, but I wasn't sure if he was putting the pieces together. Eventually, though, and let me know if I missed anything, because there are some of these things are like blurry in my mind right now. We talk so much about it, it's just like, okay. But he eventually goes back to the mansion. Which is gated, and we see that the gate is this bright blue, which is interesting. And he has this non-verbal interaction with the messenger. I'm not sure who, y'all tell me which masked man you think he was from the ritual. You never know. Could have just been the butler too, who knows? But he's handed, I can't remember what's written on there, with the exception of it's a threat. They kind of saying, drop it. All right, drop it. Your search for all of these answers should end here. And I just find it interesting because there's no conversation, even though there's no mask now. There's no mask now in the light of day. But and the is it written on a full piece of paper, or is it just
It's
right.
written on a piece of paper, but it's also, well, it's like a half, almost like a note, but it's not torn. It's like a note page. But what's interesting about it was that they were waiting for him. They expected him to show up.
Mm-hmm. Well, Victor had him followed, so they knew he was asking around. They knew he was going to be, and this is all before he sees the newspaper that Mandy has transitioned. She's no longer with us. So they knew they were like, he's going to come here next. So like, let's just make sure we have it together. Or maybe after she OD'd, they knew he's going to come here.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Master Menelik says, I never knew having a medical license could double as a police badge. You know what? I think now it's less and less like it's that whole thing, like people, when you have letters behind your name or you say something like I'm a doctor or a lawyer, people will listen to you more, or like open doors for you a little bit more. But I do think like in the 90s, you could a lot more was open up, but now people have like the internet and they know you could fake things. And so like, that whole license thing, like, there's too many people talking about I'm a cop and for any of that to go down now. But I do think like before people could Google things so easily and print things off the internet, people were easily like just the gates were opened for stuff like that. You'd be like, I'm a doctor.
Any additional?
Mm-hmm.
No, I think well, once he starts putting the pieces together, he goes to the hospital, right? I know my computer did something weird for a moment there, so I don't know if he touched on it, but he goes to the hospital. Well, he reads the article. I think we're jumbling the ending, but he reads the article that references beauty queen, like a beauty queen overdose. Mm-hmm. And he begins to read the story And the audience can also, like, if you pause, because I paused, you can actually read the story. And she's like a former New York, pageant winner. And, her sister is like questioning the fact that she would have overdosed and said she had so much to live for and had all of these well-connected friends. And a designer is even named. I didn't dig into that particular designer, but based on that, he goes to look for her at the particular hospital and is told that she died at the hospital. I thought that was interesting as it connects to the ending, because if it was in fact their intention to sacrifice her, right, for his transgression, then why would they let her get all the way home and half die and then die at the hospital when she could have said, they did it to me? So it kind of gave credence to, in my opinion, what Victor was saying. Like, she got some sex and got some drugs and did what we knew would happen again, right? Overdosed again. Yeah. But there's more, right? Because in his quest, before he realized it was her, he went to the prostitute's house, Domino. We can't skip that part. And this is where I thought the name Domino was really interesting, because had he chosen to accept her cookies when she offered it, the domino effect may have been that he would have also accepted her cooties that she didn't even know she had. So when he went to revisit and found out that she had left, she like went back home, which I thought it was weird, because I said, it ultimately wasn't ruled out that it wasn't her that was at that, that it was for sure Mandy, even though Victor touches on it. But until Victor says, the only thing that happened to her that night is she got screwed and then she went home and got high. But the fact that Domino also disappeared didn't sell to me that it wasn't her, working that night, if you will. But the roommate, after offering herself to him, because she heard how kind he was, she shared that Domino had found out that she was HIV positive before fleeing. And so it's like, phew, I'm glad I didn't take those cookies last night, kind of moment. So yeah, that's some of what happens. I think we touched on what happened with Milich.
We did. Yeah, Pimp Daddy. He yeah. Right. We did. We touched on it.
Yeah, I was saying it does make sense that Amanda would want to be his redeemer, because that's exactly what he did for her.
Right.
And she OD'd on that almost OD'd on that burgundy chair under the picture of the pregnant nude woman. I just have to say that again, because like, where do you see these things? Only in a Stanley Kubrick film. So I think that was her ode to him being kind to her, to reviving her and giving her another shot. She knew him too. It seems like she knew him very well. And I do think Domino, he does have that encounter with Domino, but there's a knowing or a connection that you build with someone when they save your life. Pretty much.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. So what would you say? I mean, then there's ultimately the final scene, which is him being summoned to Victor's home under the guise of there being a medical emergency, right? That was what Victor said, or whoever called on Victor's behalf. But he's playing pool and he's explaining that it's not what you think. None of this is what you think. it's all really innocent, and these are not people that you want to continue to dig into, right, and explore these things. Just let it all go. And of course, Bill has a series of questions, and he's probing, and Victor never truly answers all of the questions, like, in my mind, because the article never said that her hotel room door was locked from the inside, because it was the hotel staff that entered the room and found her body. So how could the door have been locked from the inside? That would mean maybe it does mean that, and maybe they had to bang the door down. But I don't know that that was in the article for Victor to have known it based on what was shared with the audience in the article. So I thought that was a little quizzical. But ultimately, Victor's job was to clean this up because it was really his mess. And he didn't want to be the next missing person. So it's kind of like, you better fix this. This was your pianist. This was your party. These were all your people. You've been grooming him for years, and now look at what happened. That's how I saw it. And so ultimately, Bill accepts the story, and he accepts the story and wakes up from the dream. And what's interesting is that in that closing scene, when they're at FAO Schwartz shopping shopping for their daughter, meanwhile she's picking everything out, it is the wife who closes the nightmare that she herself opened. Mm-hmm. She's the one who says, okay, well, we'll just pick up where we left off. It's just like, we're going to do a retake and start back over here again. When she was the one who opened this window, or this nightmare, if you will. So, yeah, be careful who you choose.
Yeah, because that whole pick up where you left off means like we're just going to go back on autopilot.
Right. I'll go back to fantasizing about Mr. Sailorman, and you go back to doing whatever it is you were doing. And none of this ever truly happened. So, yeah.
I'll continue going to my meetings that you probably don't know about because you're too busy. You never know. I think that's part of the film that is still in question. Whether she is a part of that.
Yes. Right. And maybe she wasn't as clairvoyant as we, or so attuned in her dream state as she was just physically there. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I like this. No, I will that everyone, took something away from this, particularly, I found that there was a lot of connection to many of Chief's most recent podcast segments, just the idea of allowing confusion, right? So that's one, confusion, and the martyr complex, that idea of what you allow around you and how it has an impact on you. But even the most recent segment about the value of the ruach, right? The breath. And that it's not just about that breath, but really the balance of the spirit, the body. I'm gonna mix them up, but I'm gonna get them right because I did listen many, many times. I always want to say mind, body, and spirit, but it's not, because he used word, right? So it's like your mind, your word, and your action. Or did I feel like I'm falling into the abyss here. So I got those wrong, I think.
I can't correct you because I listened too, but I can't.
I wrote them down. That sucks. Okay. So, but he's connecting it to, well, anyway, he's making a connection that I think we can see in this film, particularly even in the end when he talks about the man, the child, the woman, and the child. Well, he really says the man, the child, and the woman. in the end, it's closing with that scene, and you can see how the child is the product of the dynamic of that relationship. And somebody even touched on that in the end with the theme of how she was manipulating them the entire time, but their relationship was one of manipulating one another, right? And so ultimately she was reflecting that back. So
Yeah. I do remember the connection, like having that connection with fire. And like when we talk about like how they weren't connected, and not necessarily meaning passion, right? They didn't have that connection, not even in passion, right? Because when they did get home and they did, um, they went to have sex with one another, it was like she was looking into the mirror, almost either thinking about the Sabos, or she was upset that he was talking to, or both, that he was talking the two models. Like there was like this sinister, like she wasn't present while he was trying to make that connection with her. She wasn't necessarily present.
No, not at all.
Like when he talks about like the Esh, the fire, and you mentioned the Esh, I was like, yeah, it's like Ish and Isha, like the thing that links them, because we're alike, we're the same, but that wasn't present.
I mean, to a certain degree, there were no mysteries between, in a, and that's the last thing I'm going to say, because what woman allows for her mate, husband, man, consort to actually see her lift up her skirt and squat over a toilet? Like who in which world is that actually acceptable, except for the fact that maybe you're behind somewhere in the back of nowhere, it's all bush, and you need a lookout? Like, other than that, like I just have to say, no, I'm just gonna say, like, there has to be a lack of intimacy, because that's roommate vibes, right? I'll just put it that way. That's, and I know Chief has spoken to that. Like, there is a level of intimacy and mystery,
right,
that happens between the way the man preps and prepares himself and the way the woman preps and prepares herself. And that includes those things as well. So I just thought it was, and maybe some people would say it's comfort, they're comfortable, they have a great relationship, but we don't see that. We don't really see that level of connection and intimacy, as you mentioned. Yeah. So that's it. But this was a great build, and there's so much more that I think we can talk about. And I know you too, Ima, Yakira, you didn't probably have a ton of notes, and I didn't even get to talk about like whale imagination, because I went down the whole, how does this connect to Ruach? Because Chief just did a segment on Ruach, and I definitely think there are parts of it in there, because again, I see a less included in that too. So I'm like, well, there's a reason for all of these little gems and the connections, even to some of the things that we study. So yeah, this was great. And I'm glad it's the last one as well too, because it requires a lot. I think it requires a lot of rewatching and digging and making connections. So
yeah, this was really fun, this whole series. And I'll just say give thanks to Master Menelek, because I was like, your faces threw me off. I was like, oh my God, I think I got it wrong. So it was mind, oh Lord, now I'm missing it. Mind, word, and body. And so those were the three. It was mind, word, and body. And then it was there were like three at the very end that were making the connection. But I did want to acknowledge one thing that I thought was really, really hilarious. So I shared a bit about the screenwriter, Frederick Raphael. So after Kubrick's death, which we know happened 4 days after he shared this film with the Warner Brother execs, he has this heart attack, even though his family thinks that he was fully healthy, right? This particular screenwriter goes on like a 20-year hate mission talking about how he disagreed with everything that Kubrick did ultimately with the film. He wanted nothing to do with it. And every time I watched one of his interviews, I was laughing because I thought, yeah, he just wants to keep his life. Like, he just doesn't want to be the other one who has a mystery heart attack because he wrote the film. So I just thought that was hilarious. If you want to look up something and laugh, just look at how he cops like 20 years worth of plea. Like, I ain't do it. It wasn't me. Trust me. Like, let me live. So, but give thanks. This is exciting. And in the coming strongs, maybe next, maybe the following, our good brother will be back with a different sort of segment and some beautifully edifying presentations. And so we look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, this was fun. I think this is closing down the movie decode.
We are!
Closing down
For now, we are.
So give thanks for those of you who are watching live and those of you who will catch it on the replay.
Yes. Peace.
Peace, everyone.